Hey everybody, it's Devin Francis, also known as Dr. Blackard.
And I'm Nines.
I'll be your 2B song today. Um,
You can be tubes and I'll be nines.
it has been maybe the longest it's ever been between recordings. It's up there. It has been a lot longer than it usually has been when we say it's been a long time. Uh,
So we'll
but
say it hasn't been a long time just to throw everyone off.
street
Trick
smarts.
them. Street smarts. Keep them
What
guessing.
what are we talking about today, Victoria?
We're talking about the one with the baseball card and knocks on Sacrifice.
And what else?
And the 2020
Mm-hmm.
OAC album review.
Mm-hmm. And
And predictions for 2023.
mm-hmm. Busy. So
Because I'm looking forward to 2023. Hope nothing bad happens.
yeah, it's gonna be a good year.
I'm sure we're going to record a bunch that year.
Yep.
It's fine.
Okay, so episode 944, A Friend in Need, written by Abigail Geiger. Do you want me to summarize this episode, or?
Actually, I think I've got this one because I have listened to it 3 times.
Shocking.
What do you expect? It's a J episode. So in
It's
this
it's a
episode,
jinxed episode, even.
we have Jay, and he is missing a baseball card that his dad gave him. It disappeared when he was with his
Well,
cousin.
not that his dad gave him, that he's aware, at
Well,
least.
that belonged to his dad.
Yes.
And so he was with his cousin Vincent. I re-listened to the end of this episode today. And he is trying to get, I almost said Priscilla. Oh my goodness. Help.
Zoe.
Zoe. I'm tired. He's trying to get Zoe to help him track down the card again. Along the way, Buck also gets caught up in the search. He also gets his car broken into by Jay, who thinks it might be in Buck's car. Buck also works at a pizza place. And they eventually find the card, and it was at the lake. Did they find it at the lake?
No, it was like a blocked sewage outlet kind of thing. Like a blocked water treatment
They
outlet
found it at this
pond.
place where Buck collects like scum samples for his dad. he says dad. He's like, when dad wants me to, I was like, I've listened to this episode 3 times. I re-listened to the ending of it today. I knew he was gonna say it, but it's not like he didn't even say my dad. He just
says
said
dad.
when dad, and I was like, I scream every time I hear that line. I'm very unnormal about them. 900th Eugene reference also.
Yeah. Which is funny because it's funny because in the AIOC this year, I realized while re-listening these episodes, he shows up like 3 or 4 times in episodes, just never as himself. So maybe they're ones that were recorded previously, but he does
You mean
voices.
just like Will?
Yeah, like Will Ryan shows up doing voices in a bunch of these episodes.
Yeah.
From last year, but never as Eugene. So it could be earlier recorded audio is a possible connection that we can make among those, but we also don't know how far in advance. I mean, it's been a while now, obviously. I mean, it makes sense. You know, he passed away in late 2021. So,
'Cause I was living in Alberta.
They would have already recorded, like, a good chunk of the 2022 episodes at that point. So it's possible those were contemporaneous, but it's interesting then that there's all these ones with him as other voices, but none as Eugene, that we've got yet, at least. So.
Did you see my message from last night about the album cover?
I haven't seen it, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, I figured you would have seen it, which is why I commented. Never mind.
So, okay. Go. Is that the end of your description?
Anyway, so the three of them end up going to this baseball card signing convention. The whole episode, Zoe's being like very dodgy about like phone calls she's getting from her mom and like the topic of her mom. We find out that Olivia and Ava do like this ladies' night thing where they go to like a dance together, and Zoe said like, oh, it'd be fun to do that kind of thing in front of her mom. So her mom was trying to put together like this whole spa night, and they go get dinner and they go to the dance together, which Zoe would enjoy, but she knows her mom wouldn't enjoy. So she feels like her mom is feeling all this undue pressure to do this stuff for her, and it makes her feel bad. So she doesn't want that to happen. But Buck's like, maybe she's just doing it because she cares about you. Did you ever think of that? He's like, when I'm doing things for Dad, and I'm like, ah! So it's so sweet. It's so sweet. And also because of this episode, I did re-listen to There and Back Again, which I think Jay's dad's VA is still the same. I wasn't entirely sure, but I think it's the same guy.
I didn't check, but I believe it sounds the same.
It sounds the same. And there was like a bit in that episode, which I think is really applicable to this in the last episode, where Wilson is talking about, I don't remember who he was talking about, but like this guy, this old dead famous guy.
His name was J.R.R. Tolkien.
And he said like he one time went fishing with his son, and in his diary he wrote like, oh, I wasted my time today.
Oh, it was like a president or something, right?
Son. Yeah. And then his son in his journal wrote like, this was like the best day of my life. I went like fishing with my dad. And I think it was very much
I think it was like Andrew Jackson or someone terrible like that.
It wasn't Andrew Jackson.
Thomas Jefferson, maybe.
It was not Thomas Jefferson.
Okay.
Anyway, so Jay runs into his dad. His dad knew that the card went missing. He's surprised that it's still there. Him and Jay bond. I once again think about the fact that Jay literally has Kim Possible's backstory. Whereas the rocket scientist dad and the surgeon mom, except for his mom is a heart surgeon, I believe, and Kim's mom is a brain surgeon, so that's...
I thought they were both rocket scientists for Jay.
No, because I re-listened to, again...
Yes, I was going to say, I thought that, but obviously you listened to it more recently, so I'll take your word on it.
Yes, that's why his mom didn't go to New Zealand, and definitely not because no one's been cast for the mom, and a lot was already happening in that episode, so they wouldn't have had time. The reason she couldn't go to New Zealand was because she had some surgeries that were about to happen that she had to be there for.
That is a good reason.
Yes, it is. Jules got in another accident again, I guess. Another grisly accident. Goodness. So Jay's dad meets Zoe. Jay's been telling all these stories about how him and Zoe are a thing. And Jay's dad believes it. And Zoe's like, oh, we're not. And Jay's dad ignores her. And Honestly, I'll forgive it in this episode. I don't like it, but
I
it
feel
was
like I
a
need to
lot
start a letter
less.
writing campaign.
It was a lot less in your face in this episode than it's been in other episodes. So, and like Jay spent a lot of time with Zoe in this episode, and he wasn't like as like harassy as he usually is.
The
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 bar is
first
so low.
It's very
The
low.
bar is
The first time
on the
listening to it,
floor.
I was surprised that Zoe went along with him in the first place because like she could have just closed the door on him and left, but she was like, I need to get out of the house anyways, and left.
It
And
had very
obviously,
big Northwood North Northwood Northwest. Very big Northwest Pacifica Dipper energy. Where it's like, Pacifica's the worst, and I'd say that to her face, and then she knocks on the door and he opens it and he's like, you're the worst, and then he slams the door in her face. I was imagining that scene, but with Zoe and Jay.
but obviously then on the re-listen, I was like, I see the pieces fit together. There was a reason that she specifically wanted to get away from the house, that she wasn't just like, I need to go out. I guess I'll put up with Jay, because why not? So yeah, Buck was the delivery guy who received the tip. He's like, that's not even the weirdest tip I've got before. And I was like, yeah, it can be like that.
No, that's like, so whoever wrote that line, he's either talked in detail about what it's like to be a delivery driver with a delivery driver, or has been a delivery person.
Yeah, one time a guy tried to tip me with a rope of fresh garlic cloves, which was only 30% of the weirdness of that particular delivery. Did you have anything?
Was that the sumo guy?
No. No, this was
Okay.
like way out of town.
I've never got tipped anything other than money. I did get candy a couple times for Halloween, but that doesn't count. Because that happens with everyone. I was like legit the only person working at Pan and Go when I was working there. I think me and the other girl who was also delivering, we just never got tipped any
Any money.
recreational things, which I wouldn't have
Like weed?
taken. But I was like, why aren't you offering me? No, like every single guy I worked with was constantly being offered drugs and alcohol. Like, that must have happened to you, surely.
Probably. Yeah, I mean, I can come up with at least one time off the top of my head.
Because, yeah, it never happened to me. And I was like, I look too nice, I guess.
I was gonna say,
They
I
see
think
me
that's
and
just
they're like, oh, we can't offer her drugs.
exactly. You would die immediately.
I would simply look at a joint and perish. I forgot the word. That's why they won't offer.
Quad erat demonstratum.
I just
Okay.
think it's really funny. Again, I wouldn't have taken anything. But like, what's wrong?
No, I completely understand. Where you're like, they could have asked.
I was like, why won't you at least offer me?
Exactly. At least be polite about it. So
Yeah.
we get Jay
I feel all
angst.
left out.
But they're like, why do you care
I
about
can
this?
do this now. It's not.
It becomes increasingly clear that, like, and it makes sense that the baseball cards might be a thing that Jay cares about. You know, he has like old collectible vinyls and stuff like that are worth money. But once Zoe probes in with reasonable questions, since they're looking for it amongst other baseball cards at the pawn shop,
She's like, what baseball player was he? And he's like, I don't know, tall. And she's like, you don't know anything about baseball, do you? She's like, what was the guy's name? And he's like, it didn't have a Q in it. And she's like, okay.
Yeah. Once they find out, and then Jay starts like actually crying, and not like crocodile tears, but like choked up Jay angst over not being able to emotionally connect with his family and being sour.
Dude, you have no idea what this episode did for me.
I can imagine.
You can probably guess.
At turning up his nose at Zoe for like for poo-pooing, eschewing spending time with her mother when she has the chance
He's
at
like,
it.
do you have any idea what I would give if I had like that kind of opportunity? And I was like, the Jankst is good.
Yeah, I was like, I really hope he's telling the truth when he first started talking about it. I was like, I'm almost willing to overlook Jay being creepy about Zoe for the sake of all this. And he was being very sincere. He's
I
real.
believed him. That's why I was like, I gotta re-listen to There and Back again so I can hear the Jankst with his parents in that episode too.
Yeah, he's
The fact
all.
that like he literally changed continents and was too scared to come back to the US because of possible disappointment. Like, Jay needs a therapist, like, really bad. He, he needs so much therapy. And, like, re listening to There and Back again, his dad is compared to Eugene by Jason because of just, like, the way he talks.
Mm-hmm.
And when, I remember his dad had a couple lines where Jay was like, "How did you know I felt this way?" And he's like, "Well, I calculated the polarity of
Mm-hmm.
blah blah blah." And I was waiting for him to say a line where it's just like, "I was just kidding. Like, I know you. You're my kid."
Yeah.
He didn't say that kind of line, and I was like, "Oh, this is what you're actually like." Oh no, Jay.
You're waiting for the haha JK lol.
And his dad saying things to Jay and Jay being like, "Okay, I want to spend time with you," and pausing and saying like, "I don't understand what you just said. Can you explain it to me?" Like, I feel so bad for Jay. I don't get the vibe that like, I'm not going to say his parents are bad. I don't think he has bad parents. I just think like they're just so disconnected from him.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to figure out a better way to communicate with him. And like his dad trying to like create things that they can bond over is really nice, but we've never really had any examples of his parents being interested or showing any just, I don't know, interaction when it comes to Jay's hobbies that he
Yeah.
already has.
I mean, like you said, it.
Hairdressing or like just general personal grooming and fashion
Uh-huh.
and Elvis stuff, music, theater.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like you said, it comes down to communication, and the fault lies with them. And you can look at it as simple as the line that Jay's dad gives, where it was like, you must have also thought that the baseball card would bring us together in a way that Jay doesn't understand. And it's like, obviously, you know what your son understands, and the fact that you choose to phrase things anyways in a way that he doesn't get shows that you have poor communication skills. And so that's only further amplified by like the broad scope of your relationship and your ability to communicate with each other about emotional needs.
Again, I'm not going to say that Jay's dad is a bad dad because he seems very kind and he like immediately
Well,
went to New
yeah,
Zealand when Jay needed him. But also like
he's well intentioned.
he's well intentioned, but and he's not like an absent parent. But at the same time, I almost get the vibe where it's like, this is a man who doesn't understand how to be a parent and maybe wasn't as prepared as he should have been when entering parenthood.
I don't think it's unfair to call him a bad parent. He's not the worst parent, certainly. Doesn't mean he's good at it.
He's trying. I'm going to give him like a ton of points for that.
But he could be trying harder.
He could be trying a lot harder. He could be doing better.
No, I mean, obviously, this whole thing, the baseball card, like, it was an effort. He's making efforts. He's not making efforts in the most efficient places that he could be. There are better places he could direct that energy in terms of efficacy of relationship building. And that's not necessarily on him. But certainly if he kind of sought outside guidance on how to better build that relationship, I don't think it would be difficult for him to find more constructive advice on how to do better. And I think we could probably chalk that up to a lot of being a rocket scientist and not feeling like you need to, ask some softer sciences person for help on how to communicate with your family. Because obviously, I'm a rocket scientist. I can figure it out.
Jay isn't a science kid. He's not scientifically minded. He's very smart, but he is an art kid. He is a theater kid. Like, I could easily see him picking up his grades and just thriving at, like, a performing arts school.
Yes.
Like, he would just do stellar there. Like I said, his main interests that we've seen are, like, fashion, hairdressing, music, theater.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't really think of any other things he's shown. And
acting
also filmmaking.
Acting and television.
I already said acting, like theater.
Well, I know. I was saying like we've seen him in the theater, but also like
theater,
like screen,
acting, and film. He knew how to do filmmaking and editing in that one episode. So like he's very good, and he's also did really good when it came to like teaching those people about editing and like filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's so good when it comes to art. It's just one of those things where it's like this character needs to reach a point where it's like you're not dumb, you're not like messing up when it comes to these topics. It's just you're better at certain other things than you are at like science and math. Like it took me so long to realize that that's a thing. So I'm talking from personal experience here. But like, yes, there's more to education and being smart than just the sciences and the maths. There's other types of intelligence, and Jay falls into that category.
Does that tie back? It sounded like you were making a point about his dad with all of that.
I think sometimes there's a disconnect between people who are very scientifically minded and people who are very artsy. And I don't think his dad realizes that
it's got a real Dharma and Greg kind of thing going on.
Because he thinks that like him and Jay in some ways are like on the same level. He doesn't realize that there is a communication barrier.
Yeah.
Or at least he doesn't realize that there's like as much of one as there is.
Yeah.
I will give his parents this. They did, even though Jay was just like nameless extra zombie number 34, Jay's parents did watch like every single episode of that zombie show when they thought he was on it.
Mm-hmm.
And even though they did not like the show, they didn't care about it. They were like, we want to watch the show, support our son, get those views up, get it another season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
like you said,
nice.
all this to say, they are trying, they're just not doing it in the best ways that they could be. But it doesn't mean that their intentions are not there and good.
Yeah. Like for like one kid, this might be like the perfect parenting style.
Mm-hmm.
But for Jay, it's not.
Okay. So, all our characters are having their parent stuff go on. Buck is talking about Eugene, about his daddy, and how the best part of his day now is finding little bits of pond scum and algae around because they're doing their experiments duo, and I'm so happy. Buck is putting himself into gross situations so that he can spend time with his dad, and he's like, it makes me so happy when Eugene looks under the microscope and he's like, wow, this is amazing, I can't believe you found this, and it's so validating for him, and they spend time together.
Could you imagine Eugene Meltzner being like, you did so good at this science thing, I'm so proud. Like, that is the highest level of compliment.
Yeah. It's so sweet.
It is.
And I like how what they show with Zoe, the fact that she's trying to avoid this, it's not because she doesn't want to do it, but because she's like, my mom doesn't really want to do it, and so I don't want to make her do something that she doesn't want to do.
I think that's a much more interesting angle than what I thought they were initially going for. They kind of red herring it.
I think every like decent person struggles with that kind of like tripping over trying to be too polite with people, or it's like, well, what do you want to do? Well, it's like, well, I'd rather do what you want to do because I don't want to do something if that's not what you want to be doing and stuff like
Plus,
that.
like, when you're at that age range that, like, Zoe and Jay and Buck are at, that's like, I mean, Buck would have hit this faster than the two of them because he had to grow up very fast. But, like, when you're hitting, like, the middle school, like, older elementary school age range, you're basically hitting that point where you're, like, coming more into yourself and becoming, like, more aware and understanding of the world. And you're basically like, oh, wait, my parents are also people and they also have wants and desires and they exist in their own reality outside of just what's going on in my life.
Yeah.
And then you're like, what is happening? I need to be more aware of everything.
When you realize how much you've taken them for granted your entire life,
Yes.
and then all of a sudden you feel like a terrible person. Yeah.
So I think that's like, Zoe's hit that point in her life and she's like, what's going on? What is my life? I'm having a crisis. Oh, teenagerhood. I'm so glad I'm not there anymore.
You're like, I'm so glad I'm grown up, so now I can take my parents for granted again.
I'm so glad. What'd you say?
I'm glad I've grown up, so I can take my parents for granted again. I've grown out of second guessing.
I thought you said, I'm glad I've grown up, so now I can be a shonen boy. Age down again. I feel so powerful in these shorts and high socks. Like I am... I'm gonna go have unspeakable horrors happen to me.
You are, and it's gonna be great.
I am, like any good shonen boy does.
Yeah. Okay.
These gloves are so warm.
In the video, Bob is working at Wit's End, and the behind-the-scenes crew is playing a game of trying to find a baseball card that is hidden in someone's car, along with a bunch of junk that they threw in there.
They break into everyone's car. They're smashing windows.
It's funny because I know, I mean, it's visible in the episode, but I know this because I was at Wit's End in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, you were. I know you were.
It's
not like you got me any souvenirs or anything.
When you make an order, they have like table number standy things, except they have characters on them instead. So it'd be like this order, instead of being like this order's for number 28 or whatever, it's like this is for Eugene and this is for Priscilla.
That's so funny. Imagining working there, getting a job there, and you know like nothing about Odyssey, and they're like pull out a standee. They're like, "This is Eugene," and you're like, "Okay."
It says the name on them.
Okay.
It says the name and it has a picture on it.
I was imagining there's no names, and you're like, "This is this, and this is this," and you're like, "Are those your mascots?" Like, why'd you name your table Standees? Where am I?
So, in the video, Bob's like, I was learning to make, Wadfam chalk slots and raspberry bowls and whatnot. And they're like, the orders for Barrett. And he was like, where's Barrett? Does anyone know where Barrett is? And I was just like, wouldn't we like to know?
I don't know. Where is Barrett? It's like, where's Waldo? But where's Barrett?
Also, a fun piece of trivia, Gary Locke voices the pizza manager in this episode. It is his first audio appearance in the entire show, and he illustrated himself in the episode art as the pizza manager.
Nice.
So it's not the first time he self-inserted himself in the art, because I believe he's on the cover of album 50, somewhere on the expanded parade art. But it is the first time that he's been a voice.
I don't know about you, but listening to like all heck wreck, like just appear and break loose in the pizza place stressed me out.
Yeah, as it should anyone who's ever worked in any food establishment.
But like especially someone who's worked in like a pizza place, that stressed me out. I was like, I'm having flashbacks. Don't do this to me.
Yeah. So, this episode, I liked that we didn't just have like, I mean, there is, well, I wouldn't really say there's A story and a B story. It's really one plot, but it has like a thread in triplicate where it's not just like, here's someone's thing is mirroring the other person's, but rather we have it in threefold with Jay, Zoe, and Buck all have like these different comparative relationships with their parents, where we're seeing, although it is an A and a B side in terms of like, we have Jay and Zoe who are both, you know, in a bad place and trying to get better. And in Jay's part, it's like, oh, he's trying to make it better. He realizes what the problem is, and it's his dad is the problem. He's working hard. And then Zoe, where she's the problem, she's not putting any effort and doesn't want to. And then Buck, who is like the template example of perfection, like always.
Can I just say that, like, this is my favorite format for, like, episodes in anything, basically, where it's like, we're just gonna follow this one character for the whole thing. You're gonna see others, but they're just gonna have, like, tiny moments. Like, me personally, I prefer this so much more over, like, A plot, B plot, C plot, A plot, C plot, B plot, and then, like, D plot, where they all come together at the end. Or, God forbid, A, B, A, B, A, B, and then the episode ends. And you're like, where's the thing where they, like, come together? And then it's like, oh yeah, no one ever interacted from any of that stuff. And I'm like, no. I don't care for that personally, but that's just me.
Interesting. I didn't know that was your personal preference in terms of...
And then, I don't think I knew that until right now. But are you talking about just, like, general, like, I like one story all the way through? I think, yeah, I'm just thinking about that, like, right now. I was thinking about as you were talking, because, like, I'm just thinking about, like, some of my favorite episodes of different series. Mm-hmm. And I think lots of the time they're episodes that, like, just follow one storyline primarily.
Which is obviously, like, those do stand out more, like, statistically in terms of, like, if you're looking at your favorites. Like, that's a lot easier to be statistically significant because obviously when it comes to writing this type of show, far and away the most common format is going to be an A story and a B story that alternate.
Yeah. But, like, because I think it's just easier for me to enjoy that kind of thing or dislike that kind of thing. Because lots of the time when there is an episode in something, I'm going to probably like one plot more than the other.
And so you're always going to be waiting for it to come back to the other one.
Yeah, exactly. So if I'm, like, re-listening or re-watching, I might just straight up skip over one POV.
So with this, it's like, well, I'm either all in or all out.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, when I come across an episode of something and it's just, like, mainly following just, like, the one person, it's just, like, I am 100% invested throughout, like, this entire thing.
Understandable. That's a
I'm thinking about, like, some of my favorite Odyssey episodes, and they're, like...
The Gloobers.
Just one storyline. Like, Gloobers, Something Significant. I guess A Very Basset Wedding has a bunch of different things going on, so that one doesn't really apply. But yeah, that's two examples of just following one storyline. I'm not saying this is true for everything, because there are a ton of episodes I like that just bounce around, but it can be really nice to just have a very focused narrative. So
I understand that.
Yeah, those are my late night very spontaneous thoughts. That's an opinion I didn't know I had 10 minutes ago, so now that's out there.
And now I'll die on this hill.
Yeah.
I will die on any hill.
No, it's all uphill from here because I know what I want now, and I'll take nothing less.
So, yeah, my main complaint about the episode is just, obviously...
Zoe.
Zoe.
Jay, yeah.
Yeah,
I feel like...
I don't want to call it Zoe as my complaint because, as always, it's not her
Zoe's
fault.
not the problem here.
Yes.
I think this is a really good episode, though.
I would love to believe that it's all building up to some payoff, But even if it was, and I don't
You
think
know what?
that it is,
I don't believe that. I think
I
I did once, possibly.
I,
Actually,
d-
I'm not sure if I ever
I
did.
don't believe that. And even if I did, for a show like this where kids just listen to episodes here and there,
Yeah,
well,
it doesn't really matter at this point. I mean, it
exactly.
does matter,
Because
but
you
like
could easily have tons and
not
tons
as
of people who
much.
listen to all these episodes and then they never end up hearing that payoff. And so all they see is this like creepy consent ignoring behavior that's constant harassment without punishment or call out that's played off as a joke for years and years and years at this point. Bad stuff, man.
Anyway, other than that, I liked this episode.
Other than that, it was great having Jay introspect and be vulnerable about his emotions to the point where he's like crying in front of Buck and Zoe, and it's like this is in no way put on. Like these are like legit like choking up actual tears and emotions and display vulnerability. Was like, wow, I didn't expect this to happen all of a sudden.
I was like, yes, cry more, child. No. I wasn't, but I was like, oh my gosh, the Jankst. The Jankst is off the charts.
It was really nice to get
this
that.
is so good. It's feeding me.
It was nice to have like Zoe's parallel storyline in a way that was like the complete opposite of Jace, instead of just being like, here's a different tack with it, like here's the opposite, and Jay resenting Zoe, calling her out like before we know what's going on, calling her out for being so flippant about like, you know, the privilege of being able to spend quality time with her parents.
I last listened to this episode the week I got my hair dyed. That's how long ago it was. And we listened to it on the way back from Christina Lake, Mom and I. And on the way there, we listened to Groundhog Day, because it's been so long since I've heard that episode. And I was like, man, this is still such a good episode. Mom figured out very fast that Jay was like not innocent and stole the bike, but she had trouble figuring out the whole if anyone gets harmed mechanic, it resets. So I think I had to pause the episode and explain. I think I had to explain it twice before she fully got it. I think part of that was it was early in the morning and also she was driving. So, but yeah. She liked these two episodes. And by these two I mean Groundhog Day and this one. She didn't hear the next episode because I was like, I'd play this episode for you, but there's only one part I really care about, so we'll listen to a different episode. And on that note, do you have anything else to say about this one before we rate it?
No, I don't think so. I'm going to give this episode a 4.4 out of 5.
Nice. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. I really love this episode. I think it's very re-listenable, too. As previously said, I've already listened to it multiple times. I think this is the best Jay episode in a while. I really liked it.
I can't argue with that.
Liked Buck in it. I think all the family dynamics were super good. I loved all the interactions except for some of the ones between Jay and Zoe. But even then,
when he was like Princess
like,
Zoe, the source of all earthly beauty.
Even then, they weren't as bad as like.
Even once she shut him down, he was still like, "Listen to your better half," and I was like, even he can't listen to Zoe saying no.
Yeah, it's okay. I want to talk about something else. This is making me sad.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Knox on Sacrifice. Okay, now episode 945, Knox on Sacrifice, written by Phil Lawler. This is our second Knox on episode. Both of them have been in this year. Yeah. So Wilson, he's doing his podcast again, covering a theme, BTV style. We have 3 skits. I wrote a lot about the second one, even though it's just straight up, just telling the Bible. First one is a story that Wilson tells from his travels where he saw a man in a town tried to give a sandwich to a homeless man, and the man refused it because the man offering it was a Christian. He was like, I don't want it. And then later he sees the man, the man who offered the sandwich, and his daughter, who's very sweet, and she's like, while you're in the store, I want to go into the petting zoo, please, please, please,
Oh, yeah,
please,
and then
please.
she bought this
Yeah,
sandwich
so he
and
gives
gave
her
it to the guy.
he gives her the money. It's 50 cents to go into the zoo, and he goes inside, and in front of her in line is Eugene and his 100,000 children. But he's 50 cents short to get them all in. And so she drops her money on the ground, and she's like, Mister, I think you dropped your money. And then they're all able to go in, and she doesn't go in. And then when her dad comes out,
What did this have to do with the sandwich? Or was this the second story?
this is the first story. It's the
Oh,
same.
what does
It's
that
the
have
daughter.
to do with the sandwich?
Well, because that was her dad who did the sandwich thing. And then he's like, oh, sweetie, why didn't you go in? And she was like, I gave my money to them. I liked how to...
The dad was voiced by Jason, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
I liked how...
Every time he's a dad, I'm like, whoa, you don't have kids.
Even though he's like been a grandpa for like forever in real life.
I'm talking about Jason not having
Yeah, I know.
kids. I'm talking about Jason Whittaker, unless him and Jillian,
Anyways.
have kids.
Anyways.
They'd be the most chaotic, energetic, insane children. I'd be so down for it.
It would... Webigail. Webigail from DuckTales is what...
What would be
Their
like,
daughter
I'm a
would be.
grandpa, and then Monty would even be like, you've always been a grandpa.
I've always wanted
And he's
I've
like,
always
"Oh,
wanted to have a
you're-
grandkid,
you're
says
right.
Wit.
I forgot about Jenny, and then Monty would just cry.
It's the opposite of the like Arrested Development meme, like, I get, it would have been great if we had a mom. I guess mom was our mom. In a way, she is our mom. She is like a mother to us, I suppose. Anyways, dad's
Which is like opposite energy of DuckTales, where it's like, you don't have a dad, and they're like, yes, we do, and they point at Donald.
man, you need to watch the finale. Speaking of the family,
I need to watch like the last
speaking
5
of the
episodes.
family relations in DuckTales, I still can't believe. I'm so glad you haven't been spoiled on it.
Is there like a huge plot? Wait, is there? Okay, how about this? Either during Christmas or during February when I'm down there for a
Yeah,
week.
well, you're gonna
We
finish
finish DuckTales.
Yeah.
Do you want to finish DuckTales together?
Yes, I've said that
I think
before.
my next episode is the one where Scrooge has. I'm not going to say that on the podcast. A love-hate relationship with Santa Claus is my next episode, I believe.
Okay.
I think they used to be exes.
Yes.
That's my going theory.
So, I like how in these little ways, this story shows like it's not necessarily unethical to lie to someone. Is a little point in this story, because very easily the little girl could have offered her money, but instead she explicitly like drops it on the ground and says like, "Oh, I think you dropped this."
Learning to manipulate from a young age.
Exactly.
For the
It's funny, 'cause
better of humanity. I can appreciate that.
Well, it's funny because it's one of those things where we simplify like "thou shalt not bear false witness against a neighbor" to "thou shalt not lie," which is not what the Bible says. And I like these little things where it shows, validly that like, sometimes that is the right thing to do. And I just was a little charmed by the fact that that's how that went. Anyways, the dad comes back out and he was like, "Oh, I'm so touched by what you did. Here's the money. Now you can actually go in." And she's like, "No, I can't." And he's like, "Why not?" And she was like, the man threw the sandwich back at you earlier, and I said it was wasted, and you said like, true love is never wasted because true love requires sacrifice. And she was like, "If you let me in now, then I wouldn't have sacrificed anything, so it's not true love." The second story is just talking about Abraham and Isaac being sacrificed on the mountain. That's basically straight up and down what's going on there. And then the final story.
The third one, the one I've listened to
Do you want
many
to cover this one,
times,
Victoria?
and also prompted me to re-listen to Clara, not Clara,
Charlotte?
Charlotte. Another C.
One of those
character,
heartbreaking
another
C
C woman
character
who
women
Wit
in
lost.
Wit's name. Yeah, in his life.
A little like Wikipedia entry where it's like one more stroke, like check mark on Wit's trauma. Good thing no other women were taken away from him in his life after those two. Wink.
When I was talking to mom and dad about, so I mean, in the last couple months, certainly, you know, even narrowing the focus since last we recorded, because that was forever ago, I had strep throat really bad, and then a month later I had a very minor resurgence of strep throat, and I made sure to get it taken care of, because obviously strep can cause complications that can be bad and chronic and such. And when I was mentioning to my parents, I was like, yes, and that's why it's so important to make sure I get that taken care of for a number of reasons, because it can migrate through the body and cause chronic things. And I'm always very on top of that when it comes to strep, because that's how Jenny Whittaker died. And I'm not seeing me get any chronic glomerulonephritis.
You got strep, and then like I think about a week or so later, Jonathan got it. And I think Des or Riley also got it.
I didn't know everyone else got it.
And then,
I heard it was going around here. I heard a number of people
then
in Vancouver.
One of our cousins also, during the wedding, had mono. And I was just like, everyone's getting like all these diseases, like
all these throat sicknesses.
Full of disease. Everyone just.
Anyways, Victoria, did you want to explain the third story?
Yeah. So I think I almost also re-listened to I pondered very shortly if I should re-listen to the Wit's hometown hates women episode, but then I was like, nah, I'm not going to do that because I think I've already heard it like twice and I don't want to do it again. So I was like, I'll just listen to this one in Charlotte. And then I also did listen to Wilson's first episode. Just so I could do like a little bit of chronology here. Wilson's 6 different young child actors who all sound, it's not like Jack's or Wit's, where they all sound like eerily similar, where it's like they time traveled and took the kid out of the past and got him to record again present day. Nah, Wilson's all sound so different from each other. It's like the young Eugene actor effect. Who he's the only one I can really think of who's also had that, where it's just like there's a bunch of episodes where they're young and they just don't sound anything alike. Anyways, so Wilson pulls Wit into the room. He's like, I'm gonna talk about you, and I didn't tell you in advance that I was gonna talk about this on the air. And well, Wit's like, oh no.
Wit's like, I'm shutting this show down. This is my radio station.
So we get Laszlo in this episode. Laszlo Farnsworth. So
he's back.
He's back. And so Wilson and Wit and I think and Jack and I think Jack's mom also. What's important in this episode. So Wit and Jack are on their bikes. Laszlo and crew try to steal their bikes.
No, Jack crashes into Laszlo's bike.
Jack crashes into Laszlo's bike. Laszlo gets pissed and says collateral damage and tries to break his face. And they're like, we gotta get this medicine to...
Please, sir. Please, sir. My mother's been taken with the consumption.
And so
Me mum's got the plague,
Wit's
sir.
like, I volunteer, take me instead, don't hurt him. And so then Jack, like, goes and gets the medicine to his mom and comes back. So, he can be beat up instead of Wit.
He has a
And Wit will
very
be safe.
a very Robin Jacobs just in time kind of harrowing adventure of like, my bike's breaking down. Now the dog's attacking me. Trying to get it.
And the whole time Wilson's like, why are you doing this? Like, I wouldn't wait here if I were you. You're gonna get hurt, to Wit. And Wit's like, I'm doing this for Jack because I care about him and he's my best friend. And then Wilson's like, just can't imagine like doing this kind of thing for anybody. And Wit's like, I think that's really sad, actually. And then Wit and Jack, I don't think get beat up
No.
by Laszlo. They leave.
They get there just in time. Time runs out. And it's like, all right, Whitaker, time to panic. And then Jack shows up, but he brought money from home.
Wait, I missed a bit. Jack was running home also to get money to give to Laszlo.
Well, that's where his mom is.
Yeah.
He didn't say he was going to bring money. He brought the medicine to his mom while he was home.
Yeah, and he did come back with money to give Laszlo so he could get a new bike, which I imagine was like, I don't know, $5, but $5 was like your entire family dowry.
Because it was the Great Depression, yes.
Yeah.
Literally. And then he's like, I don't care. I'm going to pound you anyways.
And then he was like, I'm going to fight you anyway. And then Wilson's like, don't fight them. He gave you the money. Let him go. And then Jack and Wit go. And then present day Wit is like, and that's where the story ends. And Wilson's like, actually.
Well, no, he didn't find out in that moment. He just said, I didn't learn this until years later, but he already knew. He wasn't finding out live on air.
Okay. I didn't remember that.
Because he was
I remember just he didn't know at the time, but he found out
the first time. It is kind of ambiguous the first time as it's being explained, but he was like, no, I knew this already, but I didn't find out until years later. But then Wit is also like...
And like Wilson wasn't going to say this part on the radio.
Yeah, because Wilson edited it. He just said that Laszlo let them go. He didn't say that he was the one who stuck up for them. And Wit is like, it's to my great shame that even since I found that out, I've never thanked you for that until today. So thank you.
Wilson got beat up by Laszlo as soon as Wit and Jack left.
Yeah.
And honestly, I thought the first story was kind of cute. It didn't hit me as much as the other one, the love one, had like that story about like the doll and the letters, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that story was really cute. This one was cute too. It didn't hit me as hard. Abraham and Isaac, like, I was like, we done knew. I've heard this one so many times. And the last one, though, like I said, I've listened to it many times, and
don't remember the details, but that's not the important thing.
That's not the important thing. I was gonna listen to it again today, but
and then the kind of big takeaway at the end is that this was like a big pivotal point for Wilson, where he realized, like, oh, I don't have any friends who would do this for me, and I won't have any friends who will do this for me unless I change something.
Yeah, and then I think
time to marry Wit's sister.
Would have ended up with Charlotte is kind of the way they made it. So I mean, it still would have been years down the line.
Yes.
But this is definitely, he was like, I need to fix my life. He's like, I gotta check my walk. Mm-hmm. Every time I hear the words "my walk," I start laughing because I think of Bim Bam and Richard.
How's your walk doing, buddy?
There was a moment in today's episode where they said, while doing the WikiHow, get your grades up, check your walk. And it made me laugh really hard. Or like, first step, check your walk. Second step, get your grades up.
I really like how that, whatever, like the business, like the business helping KPIs thing that they've been doing reads for, how it has that line in the ad read that's like, provides you with one universal source of truth, which is a wild phrasing, and the first time they did that ad reading, Griffin's like, and that source is Jesus Christ. Okay, so that is the episode. So, the first story, the girl, the petting zoo, it's very sad and sweet. I understand the point that the story is trying to make. I would still point out, she wouldn't go into the zoo because her sacrifice had to cost her something. But obviously, she acted with the belief that she had cost herself something. And the fact that she was repaid anyways by her father doesn't negate that. And obviously, the fact that, her efforts count even though she didn't actually even if she didn't actually sacrifice something, that needs to count for something. Otherwise, the story of Abraham wouldn't make any sense because he also didn't sacrifice anything at the end.
That's true. There was which I don't think I knew about this until the last couple of years. There is the bit at the end of the story of Abraham and Isaac where like the sheep is like appears to be sacrificed. And that was
what they used as
symbolically
a sacrifice.
Jesus.
Yeah.
And then apparently that happened in the same place where like Jesus died later on. I don't know if that's geographically correct.
No, this was Mount
I think
Moriah.
there was something location.
There's some connection to something else.
But I don't remember what it was.
This thing with the girl story, obviously this is a quibble because while the girl was being overly harsh on herself in this specific made-up story, I do think it's a useful point to the story because even though she's kind of manufacturing her own deficit at this point, which on instinct kind of feels like a fake sacrifice, like she's like, self-made martyrdom, you could also read it as kind of like a form of fasting. Like she's intentionally withholding from going into the zoo as a meditation on the sacrifice that she made, on the gift that she gave to this other family. And even though that's not really like the way they're telling it, I'm content with that reading personally. Because I like that more than the idea that she's like, I need to make myself suffer on purpose to feel like other people have been loved. Because that's a bad way to think about love. Like, love does require sacrifice, but that doesn't mean you need to force yourself to sacrifice where you wouldn't otherwise would have just in order to make love be valid. That's not a takeaway that we want to do. Now, I wrote like a whole sermon about Abraham and Isaac because I think this is a very interesting story, very controversial story, and I kind of wanted to unpack interpretations of that as far as I've been made aware of them from like other teachings and people's takes on it, traditional Jewish takes and things like that. So I'll kind of recount Abraham's life and then talk through the different things. So as Wilson points,
how long is this going to take?
I don't know. Probably.
Okay.
As Wilson points out, there is a lot to unpack when it comes to the story of Abraham and Isaac's sacrifice. It is an exceptionally controversial story due to the whole God tells you to kill your family and you just listen sort of thing, which reads very poorly, I'll say. I will admit, in the different takes on the story I've heard before, it wasn't until this episode that I'd ever seen anyone point out, as Wilson does, that Abraham says, we will return after the sacrifice. And that is in the actual Bible, that line. Granted, the fact that he says we there's a couple possibilities on how you could read that. Namely, translation, is that first person there originally singular or plural?
Did you check?
The Hebrew? No, I don't know. I don't speak Hebrew or Aramaic.
I mean, I didn't know if you like looked it up trying.
I didn't Strong's Concordance it. No, I'm just saying, there's a lot of places in ancient languages where you have kind of that ambiguity with pluralization, just like English does, with you and you being the same singular and plural. So it could very easily be like he said, I came down would be the same word as we came down, in some languages, basically. It could be ambiguous there. Secondly, the overall accuracy of the recording of the statement, like, is that actually what he said, or was it accurately recorded because this wasn't written down until much later? and whether it was recorded as we when it was written down later because the author like knew what was going to happen, and so they wrote we because of like their foreknowledge when
Foreshadowing.
when recording the story, when writing Genesis, or 4, Abraham could have lied when he said we, because if he said we'll go up there and then I'll come down, Isaac's going to be like, sorry, what? And he didn't want to give away to everyone he was about to murder his child and burn his corpse.
He says, we'll go up there and I'll come down. And Isaac says, I'm sorry, what? And he goes, surprise!
Exactly. So apart from that, there are a couple interpretations I want to talk about because I think it's really interesting to think about the different things we can pull from this story. I rarely hear people talk about this story in a very churchy context, in the context of Abraham's larger story and the specific significance it carries. So glossing over a story, when we think of Abraham, apart from all the stuff with Lot, it is basically completely concerned with his legacy, his descendants. Abraham was an old man with no children, no one to carry on his name. Sarah was way past menopause. She was not carrying children anytime soon. When God first came to call Abraham into a new land, Abraham was like, why? What, like, I'm going to get a new land and I'm going to own it and get all these things. Like, cool, what's the point? Land, money, livestock.
Are they the ones who pretended to be siblings at one time?
Yes.
That was weird.
Yeah. Land, money, livestock. It's funny because when I was reading through it, I never put it together before that Sarah was like 95 years old or whatever when that happened. I was like, She must have been really good lucky for him to be like, this is my 95-year-old wife and she's still so beautiful that Pharaoh will kill me to marry her if he knows that we're married.
She was a cougar.
Not because she
didn't. It kind of
didn't.
reminds me of like the idea of giving birth at that age is like so terrifying. It reminds me of like the bit from the new season of Good Omens, where it's like, don't worry, you're gonna have like 6 new kids, and she's like,
yeah, I mean, giving birth at 30 years old is considered a geriatric pregnancy technically. Like you already have increased risk due to age if you're 30 years old when you have a baby.
Wow.
So, yeah, Abraham's like, what's the point? Land, money, livestock.
I can't wait to be geriatric if I ever have kids.
I have no family. My servant is going to get my inheritance, Eleazar. So what is the point in accruing anything? And God told him he would make his descendants more numerous than the stars in the sky, the sand on the beach, blah, blah, blah. They make a covenant about it, etc. We know the story. Next thing we hear, Abraham and Sarah decide that since she is 90 human years old and she is not going to get pregnant...
90 human years old as opposed to 90 dog years.
She's like, I'm not having a baby. That's not how that works. Men continue to be fertile forever, essentially.
Gross.
In theory. It doesn't work that way with ovaries.
Why did I think of Leonardo DiCaprio when you said that?
Well, you should have been thinking of Robert De Niro, who just had a baby at like 88 or whatever. Yeah.
Who is that guy who was it Robert De Niro who just like divorced his like 20-year-old wife?
That could be Leo DiCaprio.
No.
He never dates anyone older than 22.
80-plus-year-old guy who
I don't know.
Just
had
like a kid with like a 20-something-year-old and then divorced her, presumably to find another 20-something-year-old.
Probably Robert De Niro. Anyways, Abraham and Sarah are like, look, God says we're going to have a kid, but obviously, Sarah, you're all dried up.
Gross.
So what are we going to do? Sarah's like, here's my slave. Knock her up. Here's Hagar. Let her carry a child so that God's promise can come true. And the moment that Hagar gets pregnant, however, Sarah hates her. She can't stand having her around. Yeah.
I one time asked James questions about like all that stuff in like different religions and like sections of Christianity for like, I don't know, half an hour or more. And he was just like talking about it. It was very interesting.
So, she's like, Hagar is so smug now. She thinks she can do anything because she's carrying Abraham's baby now. And, I can't carry it. She hates her so much because of this. She and Abraham banish Hagar. They drive her out into the desert. When Sarah came to Abraham to complain about it, Abraham says, quote, "Your slave is in your hands. Do with her whatever you think best," end quote. Really let that sentence sink in for a moment and realize how incredibly dehumanizing it is for Abraham to do this. Your slave is in your hands. Do with her whatever you think best. The slave who is currently pregnant with his only child. You're keeping slaves. That's a big strike right off the bat, even though obviously it was universal at this point in history. Now you've gotten your slave pregnant, and now you're telling your wife to cast her aside or kill her or whatever she wants to do. She's just an object. Do what you want while she's carrying your only child, on top of being a living human being. So Hagar is cast out into the desert, left for dead, and an angel comes to her and says, "You've been done dirty. If you agree to return to the camp and bear this child, then your son is going to be subject to this same enormous family and blessing and legacy as Abraham's promise contains." So she returns. She submits herself with fealty to Sarah's terrible treatment. Later, God says, "Hey, I am going to give you a son with your actual wife. If you had just been patient, then this would have happened, but you didn't trust me about I'm going to make Sarah pregnant," despite the fact that obviously she went through menopause probably like 30 years ago. And you didn't need to try and force my plan into action by using a surrogate. Sarah doesn't believe it. God calls her out for it, for laughing at it openly. And then Sodom and Gomorrah happens after that. Now, Isaac is born. As soon as he is weaned, Sarah becomes sick at the sight of Ishmael and Hagar again. She tells Abraham that he needs to get rid of that slave and her son because they will never share in my son's inheritance. And note the phrasing there, because Ishmael is also Abraham's son. But she's saying she doesn't say get rid of that slave and your son, because obviously that would be an insane thing to say. She says get rid of that slave and her son because they will never share in my son's inheritance. Despite the fact that the whole Hagar thing was Sarah's idea in the first place. And Hagar came back and submitted herself to Sarah. Sarah is so driven by hatred. She won't call them by name, won't dignify them with that. And to Abraham, she refers to Ishmael as Hagar's son, not your son, because if she said, get rid of your son, the wording would be like, that's kind of a terrible thing you're asking. Nevertheless, despite Abraham's reluctance to do away with the eldest child, he banishes the two of them into the desert again, as at least God tells him, like, Ishmael is going to share in on the blessings of a nation of descendants. So he's like, well, I guess they're not going to die out there, so I don't feel bad sending them out into the desert. So he gives them some food and water, and he sends them off into the desert alone. No animals, just her walking with her kid on her shoulders into the sand. Think about the desperation she felt when she ran out of water. She literally puts Ishmael under a bush and walks off at a distance because she knows that they are both going to die there, and she doesn't want to see that happen to him. And that is what would have happened if God hadn't intervened to save them, show them where there was water, and then prosper Ishmael into into several countries where basically many peoples who would then basically become like the entire Arabic group of people today. So that's about the context that I wanted to cover as far as Genesis goes. Abraham's whole deal started with being despondent over having no children. God promised him a child. Abraham couldn't wait, so he had Ishmael with Hagar. Hagar was used and abused and maligned, and Abraham allowed it to happen. And then Isaac comes along. Abraham lets Ishmael and Hagar be sent off to die because he knew Ishmael would survive, at least technically, because of what God said. And besides, he has his real kid now, so like he doesn't need the spare anymore. The backup is obsolete now, so we can send him off. So our first way of looking at the story is the way that we typically get, the way that Wilson explains, which is God wanted to test Abraham to see if he was really obedient. Is he really faithful? He gives him a test that pulls at the most important thing in his life, not just Isaac being like his son, his offspring, but his heir, his legacy, the entire promise of like numerous descendants throughout history. Abraham has absolute faith that God is going to provide because God made a promise. Maybe, I don't know whether he thought like, I'm going to do this thing, but Isaac is going to be fine because of the promise. Or he may have thought, well, I still got a backup out there somewhere. I still got the spare, and the promise can still live through that. Or maybe he thought, maybe God will just give us another kid. I've already had 2 of them when I wouldn't have expected to, so maybe there's another one to come. I don't know what was going through his mind, and I can't really speculate on that. So he goes through with it. He tells the servants that they will both return. He goes to sacrifice Isaac. He is not pulling any punches. Because after all, he doesn't lift the knife and pause and go like, okay, God, this is when you swoop in. Like, obviously, it only matters if he really was planning on doing it and trusting it was going to work out somehow. And it does, obviously, but that doesn't stop me and many other people from thinking like, is that all there is to the story? Because obviously we know God never intended on letting Isaac die. But the fact that Abraham is willing to go along with that is really messed up, because obviously I understand the idea if God asked you to do something, you do it. But if I was Abraham, I would really, really, really be questioning, did God actually ask me to do that? Or am I getting some wires crossed? And Abraham, granted, had a very long and specific history of detailed and explicit interactions talking with God. So I can only look at this from my own eyes. But when I think about, the process of like understanding God's will and discerning if a call that you're feeling is from God or not, my mind goes to 2 places. The Nudge in album 46, or in 47, and Here Today, Gone Tomorrow in album 40. The Nudge talks about how when we feel like God is telling us something, there's a couple different ways we can try and discern if it's real. We pray, we read scripture, we see how it lines up with that, we talk to people that we trust. Do we feel peace about it in our hearts? Here Today, Gone Tomorrow talks about how we learn God's will for a situation, and how, like any friend, we understand what God wants by knowing God, their likes and dislikes, what are God's characters and principles. Those are the things that guide us to understanding what God wants for us. Now, if I felt like God asked me to burn my child to death in a bonfire, I could ask myself any of these questions and the answer would immediately be apparent. And that would be, I'm having an intrusive thought, and that's not the kind of thing that God asks you to do. Because if I did do that, as I'm sure people have done before, and I did kill my family, and I'm like, don't worry, God told me to do it. You will go to jail. And everyone will universally...
He looks like Hitler, yeah, a little.
Literally, that is the thing I was thinking of. Like, I thought God was telling me to kill my family. Like, yeah, a little. Like literally, very, obviously wording doesn't line up. But yes, I was thinking of that in this situation. Like,
I think that, do my friends hate me or do I need more sleep? And you hope a miracle happened are the lines I've gotten the most mileage out of from John Mulaney.
So, like, certainly... there probably are some congregations in the world that would hop to my defense on the news and be like, no, God did tell him to kill his family. But rather, like, the only coverage you should get is a very depressing episode of Dateline. And that's why people have spent so long wanting to believe that there has to be something else to this story. And that's why I wanted to talk about these other 2 interpretations that I've heard for it.
There's also the fact that, like, his whole life there's been a long track record of just like you said, like not doing what he said and then things not working out the way he hoped they would or God wanted them to. So it does make sense that he would have gotten to a point where he's like, okay, I'm gonna just go along with this and not like do it my own way.
So I have 2 posts. I want to read 2 Tumblr posts, one of which is mostly Twitter screenshots. This is the first, called It Was for Hagar. I never understood why God would tell Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. It always seemed cruel. But isn't God supposed to be a loving father and a just ruler? How could telling a righteous man to kill his own child be fair? And then you go back and read the story. Abraham, a righteous follower of God, had failed. He and Sarah couldn't tolerate the presence of their slave Hagar since Isaac had been born. They hated her child Ishmael, Abraham's child too, remember, just as much as Isaac was. Abraham gives Hagar a death sentence. He sent her out into the desert with her son and left her to die there, to die of thirst, of heat, of exhaustion, of hunger, of fear. Yet God saw Hagar, a slave, a foreigner, a mother to an illegitimate child, an impostor. Those were human words for her. God looked down and said, "My daughter, my beloved, you brave and selfless mother, I see you." He overturned the sentence Abraham had set and not only provided water to save the lives of Hagar and Ishmael, but whispered the same promise in Hagar's ear that he had whispered in Abraham's. Maybe he took her to a hill and showed her the stars too. Maybe he sent a soft breeze across the desert to stir the sand and say to Hagar, "Your children will outnumber these. The God of living water has seen you." And then God turned to Abraham and said, "Your turn. Take your son, your beloved son, Abraham, the promise for your future, and take the life from his lungs. You had no remorse to do the same thing to Ishmael. Ishmael, your son." And Abraham felt the sun burning his face and his body faint from thirst and walking through the wilderness, and he felt the pain in his heart at the fear of losing his child. For a moment he sees through Hagar's eyes, squinting from the sun and sting of sand. And this time Abraham listens. This time he obeys God, and obedience comes in the form of the sun glinting off a knife, of Isaac's terrified sobs. God does not need to say this act is justice. No words could make Abraham understand deeper than the terror and grief in his chest. Mercy comes for Abraham as it came for Hagar first. Ishmael and Isaac were both spared, both protected, both children of the same promise. The sacrifice was never just a test. It was not some story to confuse or contradict the character of God. It was justice for Hagar, justice from the God who sees. I really like that post.
That was very well written.
It is very well written. That's my favorite interpretation. This one is interesting because it pulls in, like, I believe, Midrash from the Tanakh about interpretations of this story, which is basically that Abraham failed the test, actually. I want to talk about this idea that is so integral to Jewishness of wrestling with God, how it relates to the idea of faith, and how that whole dynamic works differently than the Christian-centric view of faith. But obviously, as I've talked before, is a very intrinsic part of Jewishness is the idea of questioning and struggling and wrestling with God. The fact that that's literally the foundation of the nation of Israel is, Jacob wrestling with God physically. That's when his name gets changed to Israel. It's why I believe that Abraham failed the Achilah, which I assume is the Jewish name for this event. Here's my view. A bit earlier, God tells Abraham that Sodom and Gomorrah will be destroyed.
Sorry, are you also reading this from...
This is, yes. There was an interjection in the middle that was me, but the thing I said about wrestling with God was from it, and now I'm going back to it. A bit earlier,
gotcha.
God tells Abraham that Sodom and Gomorrah will be destroyed. Abraham argues and bargains, and he gets God to agree to save them if there are 10 good people. So he questions, he wrestles, he argues with God. They come to an agreement. He bargains them down to 10 good people away from just cities doomed outright. Fast forward a few chapters, God wants to test Abraham. See, the thing many modern people don't realize is that child sacrifice was rather common in the region. In and north of ancient Canaan, sacrificing a child was how you ensured fertility. Abraham definitely would have known this, so AIOO, God says to himself, "Sure, Abraham will fight me about Sodom and Gomorrah, but what about his own kid?" God says to Abraham, "Take your son, your only son, the one you love, Isaac." And the subtext here is obvious. Hey, Abe, you're supposed to love this kid. Do the same thing you did before. Show me that you can argue and wrestle and fight to protect people. Abraham misses the point. Instead of arguing or fighting, he wakes up the next day and just goes. Yes, I know the Midrash says he pushed back a bit, but that's not how my Midrash goes. I can just imagine God saying, "Come on, dude, don't do it." Because Judaism was supposed to be different, a people set apart from the customs that were around them. Just as Abraham is about to sacrifice Isaac, I can envision God saying, "Ah, crap, he's really going to do it. Get down there, Gabriel, stop this thing." See, this is why I think he failed. After sending Abraham to the mountain, God never talks to him again. God doesn't talk to him again, and Abraham's role in the story is basically done. All he does after this point is bury his wife and find a wife for his son. That is the price of his failure. I believe we're supposed to argue with God because it shows we're paying attention. I don't like the idea of blind faith. We were given brains and ideas and free will. We should be using those things. I believe that Judaism is about struggling and questioning. We still will fulfill the commandments, but we should discuss them and debate them. To me, faith is doing this. Faith is arguing and debating while still trying to do the right thing. Pirkei Avot 5 talks about arguments for the sake of heaven versus those not for the sake of heaven. The good kind will be remembered positively. The bad kind will swallow you up with no trace. To me, it's the arguments for the sake of heaven that are the definition of my faith. And a follow-up, I just tweeted somewhere else that Abraham and Isaac never see each other after the Achidah. They don't even leave together. The next time they're together is after Abraham dies. Isaac and Ishmael go to bury him. Author Mir Shalev says, after Abraham tried to kill them both, they wanted to make sure he was dead and it was safe. Another person says, that's not how it was taught at my shul. Not only does God never speak to Abraham again, the Torah tells us he came down from the mountain alone. The price of him not questioning was the loss of his son in a totally different way. Their bond was broken. He completely and utterly failed on all counts. So two very different interpretations of the story. Personally, I like the mirroring with Hagar in terms of like drawing a lot of parallels and showing how it was to show Abraham like the terrible things that he did to Hagar and Ishmael by paralleling them through the path that he put him on. But I really appreciate how this one involves like wrestling with and questioning God, and pulls on a lot of very traditional and historical Jewish teachings and midrash about the story of Abraham and Isaac.
Does it say in the Bible that he never talked with Isaac again?
Like I said, the only things left in Abraham's story is he buries Sarah when she dies, and then he finds...
Because that would have been years later, right?
And then he finds Sarah, or he finds Rachel to be Isaac's wife, and then he dies. And that's really it. I don't think we ever see him say anything else apart from like talking to Rachel's family, his family, but his distant cousins. Like I said, that's basic. He never talks to God again, and
that's like a really big time gap.
Yeah,
where a lot of stuff could have happened.
Well, that's why I'm saying it's basically the end of his story. He does this, and then at that point especially, it's very reminiscent of Moses's whole deal, where in the wilderness, when Moses doesn't trust God when it comes to yelling at the rock instead of hanging it with the staff, and he is punished with not getting to enter the promised land. He leads them the rest of the way, and then he goes up on a rock and he watches them from a distance enter the promised land, but he stays there on that rock and passes away there, not getting to actually cross the threshold into Canaan.
I imagine it's like the Key Kid from Destiny Islands, where he just falls, and then in the forefront you see everyone walking away.
Yeah, but the end of Moses' life to me very much has a lot of similarity to the way that the rest of Abraham's story is being described here, in terms of you messed up, and now the mantle of protagonist, of the one that God is choosing to work through primarily for his people, has passed from you because you did it bad, real bad.
I think there's a lot of unaccounted time where
certainly. I mean,
you can't definitively say these two never talked again, or Abraham never talked to God
that's
again.
why I'm saying it's not said in scripture explicitly in the original text. That's why I'm reading, these are teachings that come from different schools of Jewish thought, that this is what happened. You know, depending on how old those are, those may be from original accounts that are not in the Torah itself, but are surviving from that time, or they might not be. I have no idea. You know, the Tanakh is an
I just wanted
extremely
to
old
throw
and
out
storied
some
document.
opinions and
But yes,
thoughts,
granted,
counter some of the things you're saying.
it's not necessarily that much of a time gap. I mean, Sarah was 90 when Isaac was born. If he was even 10 years old when this story happened, she'd be 100. So
And Abraham was older than her, though.
he was 10 years older than her, yeah.
Why isn't he dead?
Well, he was dead soon. That's what I'm saying. It wasn't that much of a time gap. Anyways.
The next day, he died.
Finally, we come to Young Wit's story, and Jack shows up. Since the advent of Young Wit content in the last several years, where we've got a bunch of it, apart from Wilson's intro episode that you were just talking about, this is the first story we've got where Jack is present. Apart from, you know, also the later parts of Journal of John Avery Whitaker, and then we have this episode, and we have Wilson's story where he called them, you know, Al and Ave. But everything else, because everything we've got in the
I'm still ashamed that I never figured out what was going on there, but I was distracted that day.
Everything we've got in the Young Wit stories is still a couple months before Jack moves to Odyssey, according to the dates that we get in the Journal of John Avery Whitaker. So all the books, as well as the episode that we got with the Women Haters, Quentin Tremblay episode, that's still all before Jack moves to town.
Did you know that women caused every single civil war single-handed?
So I'm really glad that we had Jack.
War of the Roses? Who planted those roses? I think it was the women.
I really like that Laszlo accepted the agreement of having Wit as Jack's punishment guarantor, because I can imagine the desperation of, like, we really need to get this episode to Jack's mom, because we already know independently from the Journal of John Avery Whitaker that Jack's mom was not particularly healthy because of the factory work that she did.
So Jack already, like, has anxiety. Don't do this
and
to him.
You can certainly understand Laszlo's stance of,
he's socially awkward. He's an introvert, and I think that, like, not only does he have social anxiety, he probably has general anxiety disorder like me. Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah.
He's a very anxious boy.
I made the joke at the top of the episode, but, like, obviously, as Laszlo points out, the police sounds extremely cliche. Please, sir, I need to take some medicine to my mum. She's so sick, sir. Please let me take her some laudanum.
We've never had present-day Jack and Wilson in one episode at the same time. Do you think Wilson finished the job?
If you mean that Alan Young passed away, then yes.
I was gonna say Wilson killed Jack.
I mean, yeah, we had a pretty good send-off for Jack in the show, because they're like, well, you know, it is. I mean,
taking away from my show.
He didn't explicitly pass away in the show, but they very much did.
No, I think Jack's still alive in the show.
I don't think so. They very much did give him a send-off that was like, he is basically, like, on the verge of passing away from old age, kind of.
Jason, take over my store.
As a, like, I mean, this was after...
Jason, make sure you immediately change the name to Triple J's.
This was after...
Jason was like, okay, and then he forgot.
This was after Jason took over. He did that after he came back to Odyssey in 55 or 56.
Jason, make sure you meet a girl whose name starts with J also, so it can be quadruple J's.
Yeah, quad J's.
And he was like, I will, Uncle Jack.
Anyways, but certainly compared to, like, Tom... You think, like, Tom had absolutely no send-off or mention, and then years later they were like, oh yeah, Tom passed away a decade ago and we didn't mention it. I think that as far as characters passing away off screen, this was a lot more, like, explicit of an implicit passing away of a character. And the way that they talk about Jack in this episode specifically is what made me think, like, they are not necessarily wording it in a way that you're talking about someone who's still alive
Yeah, it's true.
when they talk about Jack.
Do I look like Jamie Lee Curtis from Everything Everywhere All at Once right now?
I'm not especially.
Okay, because if you said yes, I would have had to kill you.
So, anyways, I like how, obviously Laszlo's angry. Obviously he's going to want to beat someone up.
I forgot her name. I almost just called her Sick Jan. I'm sorry, continue.
And obviously he's reasonably not believing Jack because it's like the oldest excuse in the book. And there's absolutely no reason logically why he shouldn't be satisfied with having Whit be a stand-in so that Jack can go. Because, hey, if Jack's mom is actually sick, you don't want to be on the hook for her not getting her medicine. What if she died and now that's on you? That's a lot more heat than you want to draw. And so I was really glad that I was impressed that he did the actual logical thing of allowing Jack to do that just in case Jack's telling the truth, while also accepting that Whit can stay as a guarantor so that he can still be happy and get to pound someone even if Jack, decides not to come back. It was just a surprise
thing Laszlo ever did.
It was a surprisingly logical move for him. I mean, it wasn't his idea, but just the fact that he agreed to it. Yeah, obviously.
Like, do you want to go to jail, Laszlo? You'll be missing more than just your shoes. Actually, that was Jack's shoes that were buried.
Yes,
that
it was.
Laszlo's shoes. Why did I think it was Laszlo? Laszlo buried his own shoes as a power
pranked
move.
Pranked ya.
Pranked ya.
So,
now I can't find my shoes.
Yeah, that's the story. Like you said earlier, Wilson basically, he tried to just kind of hand wave off the end of the story and be like, yeah, Laszlo decided to let them go. He tried to be humble about it.
Care.
And then Whit's like,
we can't let people know we fail.
Whit's like, no, you don't. You got.
No, you don't. You're gonna get recognition and love you deserve.
You stood up for me, and then you got your teeth knocked in because you stood up for us. It was very sweet, and you're my brother. For the video, they mostly just played the Unplugged In podcast because this episode was also a podcast, so it's relevant. And they were just talking about absolutely nothing the whole time. Like, it was just completely random, whatever.
To go back to There and Back Again, there was a very cute part at the end of episode 4 where right when they're about to start absorbing, Jay's dad says, like,
the brains are as absorbent as ever.
Jay's dad says something very scientific to Jay, and Jay's like, oh, thank you. And then they like go off and talk. And then I think it was Whit was like, oh, what do you think that was about? And then Wilson also says something very profound. When Jay was like, wow, that was really like profound or whatever. Or no, Jay says something, and then his dad was like, that was very profound, Jay. It must be because like, and then, I don't know, Jay was like, I don't know, maybe your smartness is rubbing off on me. And it was like, no, I think it's just because we're related. We're both very smart or something. Like a very sweet line. I'm saying it completely wrong. And then Wilson says something smart too. And then Whit's just like, oh, you're pretty smart too, I guess. And Wilson's like, yeah, it's because I'm related to you. And I was like, I was like, they've come so far. And in the end,
I can't believe how long Whit hid that he had a brother-in-law.
He had a little period where he was like, actually, maybe I made a mistake and I don't like him as much. He's like, I'll pay you $500
a little period,
from the press, and then you don't say we're related.
Yeah, wait like 70 years and then I'll acknowledge you as my family again.
Yeah, that was his punishment. He's like, this is your punishment for marrying, for like eloping with my sister. Jenny planning out your whole wedding.
For not just like being like, okay, I understand that you're angry, but maybe just force the topic, just give it one more go, enough to be like, hey, she's dying, so that I could have, said goodbye to her, and that kind of would have been that easy to make that leap. But whatever.
I mean, Wilson was like, we should tell them, and Charlie was like, I don't want to tell him, because Charlie is as stubborn as Whit.
I know, and ultimately it's her choice, I guess. If I was Wilson,
it is her choice. That doesn't mean we have to like it. That doesn't mean Wilson has to like it either.
If
he
I
just
was
respects
Wilson,
it because she's his wife.
If I was Wilson, I still would have gone and told Whit. And even if he was yelling at me, you know what? You can yell over someone else loud enough that they're going to hear that, and then they're going to shut up and listen to what you're saying. And he could have.
Or you
done
can
that.
like pull out a big cue card sign that says your sister's dying.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, like Love Actually.
You Love Actually, yeah.
Exactly.
It's like, hey, I have something to tell you. Don't tell. He says to Whit, like, don't tell Jenny I'm here. Charlie's dying. Come see her.
It just frustrates me because, I don't know, relationships are a two-way street. And
that was the last conversation you've ever had with your sister.
I
said it twice in one night about two different
yes, I know.
tragic siblings.
I understand that in a way it is like, it's Charlie's decision. But in a way, I feel like she also shouldn't get to be the only person to make that choice to take away Whit's chance at closure.
I don't think in any way it's framed as a good thing what she did.
No, I know. I'm saying that...
Like, I feel like it's objectively very morally ambiguous, leaning towards negative.
I'm asking the question, would it have been wrong for Wilson to have gone behind her back to let Whit know?
No.
Because that's where I think it's like...
people arguing that, like, it's better that he didn't do that and, like, he respected her wishes. But, like, me personally, I would have told Whit.
I mean, I certainly would have. But I'm curious because you can, like I was saying, you can read it both as, like, well, it was about, like, Charlie's choice. But then I'm like, well, it's both of their relationship.
Yeah, well,
and
the
Whit
episode's
also
not called Charlie's Choice or Pamela's Choice.
Whit,
it's called Charlotte. Makes a big mistake.
Whit should also have the choice on whether or not he gets to say goodbye to his sister. And I don't think it is solely on Charlotte to be the one to make that decision.
Yeah. No,
that's
I
what
agree
I
with
think.
that.
And that's why I think it would have been morally...
And that's why I think we should cancel Charlotte. I think we should write her out of the show. I think we should take her character out of the show. Cancel Charlotte.
You know me, I've always been the biggest proponent of Whit not having a sister.
I've always been a big fan of cancel culture. Let's get her out of the show.
Oh boy. Okay. So this episode, what were your...
And on that note, let's rate the episode.
Yeah, what were your thoughts on this episode?
I think this episode is pretty okay. I thought like the part with like the girl and her dad was cute. I've heard it's still a good story, Abraham and Isaac. There's a lot to be said about it, which you've said pretty much almost all of it.
Yeah.
And I'm dropping things. I dropped the Iliad on my foot. I really, really liked what was done here with Wilson and Jack and Whit. And I think it's always nice to get to see Laszlo, because it's also interesting to explore him more as a character, since...
This is the second time we've heard from him. I mean, since
we always
format,
hear,
to be fair,
he's one of those
we've seen him in the
characters you
books.
always hear more about than you see. And also, like, if we want to do our Wilson redemption that we know is going to happen, you need to have a greater negative, like, antagonistic force than him. And it's nice to see, like, this episode, because it really did feel like the missing puzzle piece that we hadn't gotten in his narrative. Because so far we've just had, like, him at point A and point B. And we never really got how
We're looking for some kind of missing link.
he got from one to the other.
Some kind of forgotten blank era. We need
Some
to see
kind of-
Wilson in the astral plane.
I was gonna make a monsters versus aliens joke, but we went in a different direction than that. I saw people speculating that it's called the blank era because there isn't much written about it in the Book of Prophecies. Anyway, while you think about that, I'll keep talking. Anyway, so I think it's nice to get to see these sweet moments between Whit and Wilson. I'm all here for them making up for lost time and like trying to do away with a bunch of past regrets and move forward together, which is really nice. And this moment to me feels like the beginning of them having a relationship. And it's nice to see like the inception of that.
Yeah. And it's still like they're talking about them being teenagers. So this is still at least 3 years forward from where we are in the Young Wit
I don't think
books.
we're ever going to get to this point in the books.
No. I'm just saying in terms of Young Wit episodes and stuff, they've still left
I can pretty confidently say, especially since I don't know where the books are right now. Where are they? I think they stopped after COVID.
There hasn't been anything since
kinda
COVID, I
killed
think.
them.
Yeah.
I think we should write our own ending. I think we should do an Oddcast episode where we just say how the book series ends.
We spoil it for everyone.
We spoil it? What do you say?
Yeah, is that not just what our predictions are? Because we're right about everything.
We are right about everything. We predicted Jeff Lewis coming back. I predicted Wellington coming back.
I meant specifically about the Young Wit books and the Blackguard books and kind of their like...
I meant about everything when I said everything.
Well, that's you. You're right about everything.
I'm right
We're
about
right about
everything.
the books. Yeah, it's good
Now
stuff.
I just need Jeff to...
My point is that this episode takes place far enough in the future from where we've been seeing a lot of Young Wit stuff that there's still plenty of playing room on both sides of this event to show plenty of stories about Wilson like pre this moment and plenty of stories Wilson post this moment.
Question, do you think we're going to get more teenage Charlotte?
I hope so. That we've never heard
I
her
would
not as an
love
infant
to get an
or
episode
as
that
a young
starts her relationship with Wilson.
I hope we do, yes.
That would make me very happy.
Man, it must be, I'm trying to remember, she's what, like 5 years younger than Whit or so? Something like that, 4 or 5 years.
Probably. And Wilson's Whit's age.
He is 2 years older. Or 1 or 2 years older.
Okay.
He was held back a grade, but he's in the same class, yeah, so he's a year older than Whit.
I want to know what, like, spurred him to start liking Charlie and stop liking Emmy. And I want to say it's like Emmy just went completely feral one day and like bit off one of his fingers, like something crazy.
Wilson's only had 4 fingers this whole time and we haven't even noticed. And it's like, oh yeah. Emmy swallowed it, and when she proposed to Jack, she gave him the engagement ring on Wilson's severed finger.
And Jack was like, how did you know? He stole this ring from me when we were this many years old. I finally got it back. And Emmy was like, anything for you, babe.
And then that's how we learned the beautiful gift-giving protocols that would later leave him to give Joanne an elevator.
Yeah, it's the grand gestures they really fall for.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, man, what a messed up friend circle Young Wit had. It's got a real...
Oh, could you imagine if Wilson was present during the triangle nonsense?
At least Jack's like, at least Wilson's lucky because he has the one girlfriend that Whit won't steal.
It's because he can't. That's the only reason why. I think Jack deserves a little bit more credit than he's given, because here he is complaining about how everyone always stole his girlfriends, but like let's not forget, Wilson did like Emmy first, and Emmy and
Well,
Jack, Emmy and Wit, I think, did kiss in one of the books for
uh-huh.
like a play.
I think we did. Yes,
And
you did.
and she was like, "Nah, I want to be with Jack
We
because he
did
got
talk
that
about how it
riz."
actually became like a triangle, or I guess maybe like a star, like it's like two interlaced triangles, uh,
The
because
Star of David would have very different expectations going into
yeah,
it than an episode called The Triangle.
because um,
You'd be like,
Wit
"Oh, this episode's about romance."
Wit stole Jenny from Jack, and Jack stole Emmy from Wilson, and Wilson stole Charlotte as, in a as a sister from Wit. So
Yeah.
it all
And
went
then she became
in a
Wilson's
triangle.
sister. He's like, "I'm gonna steal your sister. She's my sister now." He's like, "The
But we've
ultimate
talked about
revenge I
that.
can get, becoming Wit's adopted brother."
Literally, yeah, and we've talked about all that before, how it all goes in a loop then because of Wilson and all that stuff. Anyways, what was your rating for this episode?
I didn't give it one. 3. I feel like that's pretty fair.
Yeah, I really love getting young Wit. I like that this is a little bit more forward in time so we can get more developments. Like Jack can be present for one. I liked how when Wilson first starts telling the story, Wit doesn't know what story it's going to be, and Wilson
I
introduces
like
it.
the fear in Wit's voice. I like it. I like Wilson because he's powerful and he knows the things Wit doesn't want the world to know, and he can put that fear of God in Wit
And he
that no other
does.
character
He abuses
can.
that
And he
power every
does.
time
And
they interact, and it's wonderful. Um,
it's he's like the moon to Wit's sun. They're like the fire to each other's water.
uh-huh.
One can decimate the other. It's beautiful.
um, I like how Wilson was like, I don't know what story this is, and Wilson's like, it's the one that started when you and Jack were riding your bikes down Main Street, and Wit's like, I think if I know which one you're talking about, then it's this one, and it goes on from there. And when the first time listening, I was like, that's wild if he picked the right story, because that is an incredibly vague way to start. And then later, after listening to it, I'm like, okay, I guess given the events of this story and that they were talking about sacrifice, it's not unreasonable that Wit could have figured out what the story was just from that. But the first time listening, I'm like, that'd be a wild pull. He could very
Can you
easily
imagine
start
if it
telling
was
the
a
wrong
different
story.
from the one like he was expecting, and he just put him on blast? It
Yeah.
didn't even have to do with sacrifice. He's like, that one time I saw you break that window of the shop and then run away and then like not leave a note or anything, and you never got in trouble, but I saw it and I knew it. I knew you did.
The one time you got kidnapped by a famous bank robber lady who Ma Beagle from DuckTales was based off of.
Everyone listening to the radio like turns it off. They're like, we don't need to hear this.
Yeah.
This sounds like we shouldn't be listening to this.
Remember
What's your
that
rating, King?
when you had one of the most sacred biblical artifacts in the history of the planet, and it belonged to you, and it brought you back from the
Remember
dead when
that
you're
time
2
you
years
got
old?
canceled for being a feminist?
The government doesn't want you to know that women exist.
The birds are controlled by the bourgeoisie, except for it's real in the books. They're gonna be like, Dr. Blackguard's mentor caused the Great Depression, and that's canon?
I was going to say Dr. Blackguard's professor was maybe a Nazi, question mark, but then I was like, although we did also find out that his dad was an actual Nazi, so that would just be par for the course.
Like the professor's dad?
No,
was?
Blackguard's dad.
Oh. Wait, when was... Oh, right, that was in the books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that they
I was
came
thinking,
and they
like,
changed.
what part did that get?
They came to America and they changed
they
the name
changed their
from
last
Blackguard to
name.
Blackguard.
They moved.
Yeah.
From whatever it was to bad guy, because that gave people comfort.
Well, because it used to be blagueur, which is excellent because it both means a liar and like a jokester, a prankster in French, which captures both Blacker Regis's villainy, but also the Harlequin theater and the clownery of a Harlequin. It's a perfect dual meaning in French.
I was marking these papers or these assignments, and there was one person whose last name was Knight with a K, and just like a normal like guy name, just like a normal like
Roger,
James, or like
Philip,
something along those lines.
Yes.
A name that could have worked for like older kind of
yes
regal gentleman. And then the person underneath it, I don't remember their first name was. It was kind of like a more flowy lady name, and their last name was Malenfant. No, it was Malenfant, like bad child. And I was like, I'm literally looking at a protagonist and their arch enemy. They're in class together, and I'm going.
They're being raised together like Megamind.
Yeah. Like Megamind and Metro Man, and I'm gonna see them fight one day.
My name is Saint Knightley, and this is bad evil villain. And his name was.
And I was like looking at it, and I was like shaking my computer. I was like, "Is anyone else seeing this? I'm going insane."
His name was Dr. Astan Liebernis.
Anyway, that made me feel like a crazy person. I was
reasonably
like,
so, yeah.
What is this?
It's the same as when you see a baby named Friska.
It's like, and their names are right beside each other too, which like I wouldn't have probably really noticed if it weren't for the fact that their names were one right after another. And I was just like, is this on purpose? Is this just to mess with me?
Bad Baby. Hello, Mr. Bad Baby.
Hello, Mr. Good Baby and Mrs. Bad Baby. Anyway, that wasn't that related, I guess. It was the Blackguard thing made me think of it. But I was like,
it is interesting,
and I'm glad you told me.
I'm glad you told me. I liked the Wit thing in terms of like, you know, slotting in a new era of Wit lore, getting to hear from Jack and Laszlo, which we don't get a lot in Young Wit audio or the books. The middle part, they really didn't add a lot to it. Just, you know, it's just Abraham and Isaac, straight up and down, pretty much. They pointed out the thing about Abraham saying, "We will come back down," which I hadn't noticed before. Apart from that, there was nothing really new added to it.
I'd never noticed that before either, but if he hadn't said anything, I would have just taken as he's lying.
Yeah, I had to go and check and see, like, okay, is that actually something that's in there? Or is Wilson saying,
no, I wasn't saying, like, Wilson's lying. I was saying Abraham's lying.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what I was saying.
I believe that was in the Bible, but I was like, Abraham, are you lying to your son?
Like I said, that seems the most likely possibility to me. Besides a translational kind of thing, it's just,
like,
Abraham was lying.
I could see it being like, we'll come back, and I'm confident we'll come back. I could also equally see it as, I am lying to you.
Yeah, because when Isaac's like, "Hey, Dad, where's the sacrifice?" He's like, "It's a surprise tool that'll hurt you later." So
I also think I've seen the meme where it's like Padme and Anakin. It's like,
yeah,
we're going to grab the sacrifice
lamb, right?
now, right? You're like, the sacrifice now,
exactly,
right? Like,
yeah.
Dad?
So, like, yeah, because of all that, yeah, obviously he would lie to Isaac about it and be like, "Yep, we'll be right back down after these messages." Anyways, the first story, it was cute, but I don't know. It was very simple. Like, in my mind, obviously, as you pointed out, I'm comparing it to the first Knox on episode where we had this story.
Or like the doll story that made me cry.
Which was had so much more to it, and it was so like much more like sweet and emotional. And
it had depth, and I don't think this one, it kind of had depth with like the last little part where it was like, no, I can't.
But like I said, it's also like a
like
self-enforced kind of way. Where it's like, you feel bad because it feels more like, oh, this child feels like
all my homies love to feel pain.
It feels more like, oh, this is a child who feels like now she has to punish herself in order for things that she does to be valid and good. Which is the sad thing. And that's why you
teach the kids how stuff works. Teach the children.
So I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5 as well.
Okay, speed review. Speed review.
Well, we'll finish this recording here because it has gone over long.
Okay.
So end that here, and then we will talk about the year as a whole. All right, time to finish up the 2022 year for the Adventures in Odyssey Club. We're thinking about Dickensian Dilemma is our first episode.
Okay, this was the one where Emily was going through all this stuff. I like this episode a lot still. I haven't re-listened to this one, but I've thought about it a lot.
Like 2 weeks ago, I heard Jeff on a podcast mention the Curiosity Shop book. He was like, I haven't heard of it, but it's a book. And I was like, I've heard of it because of this episode. So
I still am not big on what they did with
I still
boy,
really like it theoretically, because it captures really well, like I said, the idea of what a dilemma is, which is not just a tough question to solve. It's specifically something where none of the answers are perfect. This episode really hammers home, like, helping kids understand what ACAB means, I think, because it's not just like, man, there's some bad apples out there police-wise, or there's corruption in the police force. It specifically shows you that even though Emily Jones means well, she is still ultimately forced to do terrible things that she knows are wrong, like locking up Nell and putting Molly in the orphanage. She is faced with the choice of continuing to do the corrupt bidding of businessmen and hurting people in need, or helping people in need by going against her job. This is the crux of the episode, and it's why the concept of the police institution can't be changed inside by good eggs, because it's inherently designed to protect the wealthy and powerful, and this episode actually does a really good job at showing why that's the case. So, I like that. I like the literary references. I do find it funny that in terms of the design for an imagination station program, it doesn't really work unless you have Renee standing on the outside to explain the ending of the program, because if you picture any other kid just going in kind of unguided into that experience. Also, most kids
That'd be really funny.
aren't
They
gonna
leave
know
and they're just like, well, that sucked. And then they go home and they're like, I didn't learn anything.
Yeah, they give it 1 star on the interface and then they leave. I also imagine that most kids would not recognize anyone in there except for maybe Jacob Marley, if they are not Emily. You know, maybe Bill Sykes if they saw Oliver and Company.
I love talking Oliver and Company with children.
Yeah.
I think if they've seen, only if they've seen Oliver and Company.
They could see Oliver the musical, I suppose.
I don't know any children who have seen Oliver.
Yeah, I mean,
I know lots of children who have seen Oliver and Company. I don't know any children who have seen Oliver Twist or read it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that as a child, my memories of Oliver and Company would have prepped me to recognize Bill Sykes as he appears in this Imagination Station program as being a character from Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist.
We didn't own Oliver and Company.
Yes, but I had seen it. But also, I didn't even know that it was Oliver Twist.
We'd seen it, but only when we went to Vancouver.
I didn't know it was Oliver Twist either, so.
I didn't know what Oliver Twist was.
So.
I thought Food Glorious Food was a banging song from Ice Age 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same.
I felt so betrayed once I got to high school and I watched Oliver and then found out it was from Oliver. I was like, what do you mean? But I like the music from Oliver. There are quite a few songs that I really enjoy and will sing just for fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've never watched the musical a second time, but
Hard Knock Life.
It has some really good music.
Sun will come out tomorrow.
You say Hard Knock Life?
Yeah, Sun will come out tomorrow. good songs in there.
Annie.
So, any other thoughts?
That's Annie.
Any other thoughts on Oliver Twist? It's the same story.
You're a monster. No, it's not. Annie doesn't have any death.
Annie is just what if Oliver Twist was Irish?
I don't like this conversation. I want it to end. I thought this episode was cute. I thought it was charming and thought-provoking. Again, I'm not big on what they did with
but you're also generally you're very against open endings historically.
I've thought more about it. Like I said, I've thought about this episode since it came out. I'm not big on open endings. I do like this episode. I think this episode doesn't work in the way they intended if it has a closed ending.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So that's why good episode.
Yeah, it's surprising because by the nature of adventures in Odyssey, it's very surprising to see them present a moral dilemma and then not prescribe the correct moral solution. To specifically say, like, there is no right answer. There is no, this is the right thing morally, spiritually to do.
It's also, like, writing-wise, not the easiest thing to have an open ending of this ilk and have it be a satisfying ending. Like, you can have open endings that are still thought-provoking, but, like, the endings just suck. So
the end, question mark?
This was a good one. Are you talking about
just anything?
A series of unfortunate events? Oh,
no.
Okay.
In for a Penny is our next episode.
Is that the one where Penny was
teaching
had the
in
really
prison.
Cute scene where Penny and Wooten were talking about like growing old together?
No, that was like 2 years ago, I think.
Never mind.
In for a Penny is where she's teaching an art class at the prison, the juvenile detention center.
Right.
Sorry.
I like this one. It has like the kid who is colorblind.
Yes, and then the other one
this episode was very good.
Paints the mural on Becky's
the mural
farm.
which scars everybody, and then they all insult him for like 20 minutes straight.
Yeah. When I was going back through this album, what I found is that it was a season full of episodes where none of them like phenomenally stood out as amazing generally, but all had like
some really good moments.
Some really good nuggets that I really appreciated conceptually. And for this episode, despite the fact that they emotionally massacre Ben about his gory mural in a way that is incredibly non-constructive, and the color blindness thing feels misrepresentative of the condition, generally speaking, I still do really like the episode overall because it shows how Penny, despite having good intentions, still had to work really hard to overcome her prejudices in order to treat these kids with compassion. And it's a good example of how we sometimes don't realize how much we fail to view certain groups around us as human individuals with hearts and dignity, even though we, feel like, yeah, I do that. And I think that
good
is
episode.
a good
I don't have a
reminder
ton
for
to say
people.
about it, but
I like how even initially when Penny is like, I don't like, it's a good example of her bias showing right off the bat, where she's like, I can't do that. I can't talk with like teens, and these are juvenile teens. They're criminals. And Connie is like, Buck was in juvenile detention. You can talk to him.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Stop generalizing everyone as this societally upheld image that you have, because on an individual basis, these are just people, and you know them. Drake and the Aberrant Automaton.
I just rechecked what this one was about. Yeah, this one was cute. He like gets a new friend in this little robot.
Yeah, it's a very, I'm sure we said it when we reviewed it initially, but it's a very Darkwing Duck.
This was the one that reminded me of Mandalorian, isn't it?
probably.
where he like gets a kid at the end, basically. Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought this one was cute.
I really like, you know, doing, you know, obviously it's something that's done all over the place. I never expected Odyssey to handle the idea of like emerging sentience from a digital perspective, not like they're doing it in a modern day context of like, oh, generative AI and stuff like that. But you know, it gave opportunity for good stuff morally. I love the cold open to this episode. The it's written really well.
Oh, the lady like
it's
calling
it's subverting,
the phone,
yeah.
like it's very Scream
Horror movie moment of the old lady hiding from the
Yeah.
killer robot. It's really good. All of the jokes that Olivia makes in this episode of like meat sack and flesh bag and stuff like that are very unexpected that they could put in the script and get away with that. I didn't notice the first time that when Drake, like the last thing that he says to Stella before like he takes her in after they've reached this agreement and she's like, okay, I trust you. And he says, tell me your name and take my hand, in a very specific way. And I think it probably, like, the first time I was listening, I have to notice that, like, his tone was kind of weird. Like, he was, like, saying it with, like, capital letters. But I wasn't thinking about it hard enough to realize, like, oh, that is what the synths say when they boot up for the first time in order to, like, recognize the touch and the name of their master. And so he was saying that to her, tell me your name and take my hand, insinuating that he's making himself beholden to Stella in the same way that she would to an owner.
It's the found family for
So
me.
that was like a sweet moment that I didn't pick up on before. Yeah, I really like the episode. The weird thing, I mean, it's interesting that they're like, wow, these synths are developing emerging sentience. Stella's the only one we know of so far, and the way that he is able to keep her is by agreeing that he will not blow the lid off and announce to the rest of the world that their robot servants may be gaining sentience, which seems morally questionable. That he doesn't, they're like just condemning the rest of Stella's entire
Didn't they make it
race.
sound like they were gonna go get like some of the other robots?
No, I don't think so. They're just like off on another adventure. That was
like,
his,
not our problem.
his condition to being
Leave.
allowed to keep Stella existing was that he keeps the secret of her existence from getting out to the public and not letting the synths awaken to their own sentience. I mean, as far as we're aware,
He's like, anything for my daughter.
as far as it is the very Last of Us. As far as we're aware, none of the other synths,
I'm okay with that.
none of the other
I need to
synths
finish Last
are
of
currently
Us.
sentient, as far as we know for sure. But chances are, logically, if Stella, gained a conscience, then it would follow that any of the others could just as likely. So, and it's not like there's never any real continuity between Drake. So I don't expect, I mean, I'm sure Stella will be back in the future.
She better be back.
Obviously, I think she will continue to exist. I don't think that they're going to return to the question of what happens to the other synths living in indentured servitude. So, way of the comic book. The way of the comic book.
I really liked this one. I liked Jay in this episode a lot. There's been like a lot of good Jay content in the past couple years, aside from the whole Zoe thing. Like, he's had quite a few very good episodes.
It's true. What happens in this episode, Victoria? One sentence summary.
There's a kid who wants to start making his own comic book content, gets Wooten to be his sensei. Pretty much.
Yeah. So there's some
kind of Karate Kid vibes.
Yeah. Yes. Very obviously, intentionally Karate Kid. Yeah. So there's this one-off random character named Buddy Norman, And he wants Wooten's help.
It's not the same Buddy that
It is Buddy, yes.
has been in. Oh, that was a joke. Ha ha ha.
Uh-huh.
I was confused. You can't say something like that. I'll believe you because I don't remember Buddy's last name. I was thinking that's weird to have two
buddies who are
characters
super obsessed with
presenting
comic
Buddy.
books and are friends with Jay and have the last name Norman.
I still want more Buddy Zoe content. 'Cause
Yeah.
there was like
The one episode.
a thing there.
Buddy, he wants Wooten's help with comic books because Jay is being a Debbie Downer, a hater, a troll. That's our first instance of the use of the modern definition of troll in AIO. Is this episode? Jay's trolling him, and Buddy's sick of it, so he gets Wooten to train him. He does a bunch of Karate Kid stuff that doesn't make any sense, and then Jay criticizes Wooten, and Buddy gets all upset because he's like, "You're just hating on Wooten because you're trying to get back at me." And Wooten teaches Buddy how to accept criticism because sometimes Jay is correct.
He does like the whole cake.
Yeah, they also
metaphor
do the "it's a cake"
thing.
meme. Yeah, I forgot. It's funny. We talked about earlier in this episode how Jay's home address was just in the card episode, Friend in Need. I forgot that Jay's house address also comes up in this episode, so it's mentioned 2 episodes this season. Good thing it matched, or that would have been very embarrassing. I believe they were both written by Abigail Geiger.
Let's dox Jay.
So that makes sense. But it comes up when Wooten does the pie thing, where it's like, it's from Wit's End, it's from Jay's house, it's from Hal's Diner. I really do like the specific exercises, just as you did. The Wooten gives Buddy in this episode in the clever ways in which he then shows their specific relevance to the theme.
Like holding all the balls and
Yeah, and
once,
examining
the
the cakes, the pies,
I don't
and
remember
stuff
what
like
the
that.
other one was.
The cake, the pies, and the balls. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Is it a cake or is it a real thing? Where did the pies come from? Consider the source.
Oh,
and trying to
right,
catch the
yeah.
tomatoes
Is it
while you're
cake?
holding the exercise ball, because while you're holding onto your pride, you can't catch criticism or be able to discern between good and bad constructive incoming comments. So, they really pound on Connie in this episode because I'd forgotten about Wooten hitting Connie at the very end of the episode with like, "You did a great job. I've always thought you had a naturally evil voice," which had become my new favorite Wooten dig at Connie.
There's so many.
But also,
Doesn't Connie play like the love interest to Jay's character also?
yes,
That's weird still.
and I mean the pie exercise for Buddy also involved like, this pie is from Wit's End, and the crux being you don't want it because they don't serve pies, which means Connie baked this herself, which means you don't want to eat it. I mean, it's not like there's anyone who has not taken any chance they could get to rag on Connie's cooking, especially since Jules came into the picture.
I know that like Eugene is the go-to that you think of when you think like someone like saying
Making
teasing,
digs, yeah.
friendly, antagonizing things to Connie. But like Wooten is just S tier. He's like Eugene is S tier. Wooten is above S tier. He's on his own tier because they're said with such sincerity, and he doesn't even
so
realize
sincere and
necessarily
so
that it's an
straightforward that
insult.
Connie doesn't even like. Connie is always like, "Wait, what?" Like, it's always double
Yeah, like
take
Connie
things.
never expects it from Wooten. She expects it from Eugene, and Eugene knows what he's doing.
Well-
With Wooten and Connie, it's like they're both caught a little off guard.
The thing also is Connie and Eugene, it's tit for tat. Wooten
Yeah,
to Connie
exactly.
is completely
It's
unprovoked
so
and
unbalanced.
one-sided. It's always uncalled for, unprovoked, and completely unreciprocated.
It's like what's a king to a god? What's a god to a non-believer between
Yeah,
the three
Eugene
of
and
them?
Connie
Like,
and Wooten, yeah.
yeah, just Wooten's on his whole
Yes.
other level.
Knocks on love.
This one was the one with the little doll.
Yes.
Yes. This one was cute.
This one is,
It had
it
the
has
story-
the little doll. It has the story Mrs. Shrew
The
and Mr.
coin?
Sage. Sorry?
Yeah. I thought the story had coins in it.
No. And then there's this...
I think I'm thinking of a BTV.
The story of Zakynthos and how they prevented Jews from being
The
deported.
Nazi
Yeah, when the Nazis invaded.
This one was good. I don't really remember the Shrew story that well. I think it had to do with her husband and like treating him well. Yeah,
I'm a really big fan of the first sketch because it demonstrates really well, like, fake it till you make it, in terms of the fact that love is an action and not just a feeling. And also, as we emphasized during the review, that before pulling this whole trickery on Mrs. Shrew, he did immediately make sure, when she said that she wanted a divorce, that she wasn't being abused.
Like, you're not being abused
in any way,
like,
physically or
nothing bad is
emotionally,
happening.
before then being all schemy and trying to fix their marriage.
Yes.
Yes,
Good.
the story
Good stuff.
of Brunei the doll is deeply sweet.
It made me like really emotional.
It's really sweet and emotional. I also like still how Wilson makes the specific point to, like, when the old man is helping the little girl look for her doll the whole day, it is like, I made sure to get her mother's permission first, and then stayed in full sight of her mother during the whole time, so as to dispel any, like, potential misunderstandings of looking like this man is abducting a little girl from the park.
Just a lot of tiny little details in this episode that elevated it. And then the last story, like,
It's a true
really
story.
interesting, historically accurate.
Yeah.
Cool story.
Yes.
Didn't know about that before this episode.
Results may vary. This is Trey. Well, all of the Calhouns go on a trip to the Dominican.
Oh, yeah, this is the one. We got into the one that I listened to with Mom. I love this episode. I think this episode is my favorite of the year, probably. Like, between all the OAC episodes. It's so good.
They're so
And it gives
brutal. Poor
it's
Trey.
so brutal. It gives Trey, like, a lot more much needed attention and characterization, I'd say. It's really nice to, like, just have an episode solely focus on him for the most part, and then get more information about the family too. We got more Lucinda.
Lucia.
Lucia.
Don't worry.
I'm
She's
tired.
only. That's always your refrain when you get a
I didn't even
character
realize
name
it was
wrong.
her the first time it was.
Yeah, I know. Don't worry. She's only
Yeah.
been a minor character since, like, 2008. It's only been 15 years that she's been a minor character on the show.
Leave me alone. I like this episode. Mom likes this episode too.
Yeah. When Trey's letter is being translated by Lucia, all I could think about was Mom's reaction when you were listening to it with her.
Fishing for gold. Unless you have more things to say about the last one.
Not particularly. I thought it was interesting that they kind of focused on this, like, all you were thinking about was, like, the impact that you made on others, but you weren't thinking about it, like, sometimes it's about the impact it makes on you. I was like, really? I feel like there always is so much, almost, if not more, emphasis on how much this is about impacting you instead of helping the other people. It's almost like the entire industry of traveling missions trips is all about the way that it makes you feel more than the ways that it impacts the people of the places you're going, because it actually does more economic harm holistically, globally, to those communities than good. And you should just give money to people and charities who already live in the area instead of spending way more money traveling to a place and then traveling back when you don't have the expertise to be there. I digress. Fishing for gold. I love this episode
this one.
because it was poo-pooing so hard on family influencers. and family content
But
creators.
also, like, we finally get, like, that
And
weird
also
background, like, family
Full House gets a family.
information.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, we knew, I remember when I listened to this one, I also re-listened to the one where we find out Full House is adopted
Yeah, the
when he
desk.
talks with, like, Buck and stuff. So we have that, we have the wife mentions in Green Ring, and we have this now. So slowly building that lore for him, his
Yeah.
family
You
background.
can really tell how Molly and her mom both take so much after Full House in terms of their wit. Molly and her mom both flame each other
I
so
love
much in
her mom.
exactly the same way that you can tell that it's the Full House family.
Yeah, her mom being like, "Okay, you get out of the car. I'm leaving now." It's like, yeah, your dad was Full House. It's very good. I like how it's like a surprise that he's the grandpa,
Uh-huh.
but at the same time, you're like, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, at the same time, he's also on the episode art.
Yeah, but I didn't realize that was him the first time I listened to the episode. So,
Yeah, I mean, it certainly wasn't a sure thing. That's not how I picture him, certainly. Um, but yeah, it's a good episode. Um, and I'm glad that they addressed as like, yeah, we're making all this family content, and then like, yeah, it's all fake, and it gets kind of tiring, and I don't actually want to do it anymore, but my dad makes me do it, and
save this
they
child.
still didn't do it in a way that they're like, this is inherently evil, but like it's generally there's some red flags there, and that you should maintain very open communication with your children about how they feel with it also, and even if they do like it, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good thing for them, and a healthy mindset in which to try and develop yourself, which are all good things said or implied by the episode. Like I said, it's like all these episodes where it's like none of them are like super crazy standout, but they all have like these really specific niche little nuggets that I very much like. Honor of Obed Edom is next. I don't have any specific new thoughts on this episode. It's another book of speculation
We
where
had the whole conversation about the Ark of the
yes, we
Covenant
did.
being in your living room, which is very funny.
I do, when they talk about Uzzah and the Ark, and Obed Edom is so devout and stuff that I'm surprised that when he's talking to David about it and he's talking to his wife about it, that they are both remarking like, yeah, I mean, he shouldn't have grabbed the ark after it fell off of that cart. And even Obed Edom doesn't say like, yeah, I mean, David probably should have carried the ark the extremely specific way that it's supposed to be instead of putting it on a cart like pigs going to market. I'm surprised that Obed Edom does not chastise David for doing what he did in terms of transporting it like that instead of putting it on like the anointed cedar poles that are being carried by Levites in a specific procession.
I mean, I will say that, like, this is, like, I don't know, at the time, like, that's your
Yes.
king, you probably, and your friend, you're probably not gonna, like, talk smack about him. It's not like in other Odyssey episodes, they never touch on this fact.
Yeah,
Like,
I
David
know.
shouldn't have done that.
It's just surprising
So,
to me because Obed Edom is clearly he is someone who is like so devout in the face of like everyone around him like turning their back on him that he surely would know the scripture very well, and it's surprising.
yeah, Obed Edom, David comes over and he's like, you really shouldn't have done that. And then he's like, okay, I'll take the ark somewhere else
It's
later.
it's a good episode.
It
It's
is.
something I had no memory of this intermediate stay between the threshing floor of Aminadab and coming into Jerusalem itself. So I'm glad that this kind of made a theoretical expansion on one of those passages that is basically just like two sentences.
Uh, 18-yard line.
Yes, this episode is
Good episode.
brutal. But it does.
This episode's good though.
It takes a very real look at the consequences of football injuries and then brushes over them in the end because everyone's like, Cooper,
that
come on.
nurse,
Cooper,
I love her.
she is a doctor.
That doctor, I love her.
Yeah.
She's like, get out, and I love that for her.
Yeah, I adore how this episode does not mince words about, with something like this, you cannot just waltz into the hospital room and apologize to the person you hurt and, like, not just saying, like, oh.
Like, basically, it looked at all media who has, like, a character, like, rush into a hospital and be like, I need to talk to them. And it's like, no, that's not how you do that.
Yeah, and I like how
Leave the building.
It's not even just like, hey, I know you want to apologize, but that might not work. It's like, this is actively something that you should not have even tried to do without talking to his doctor and getting proper permission. You are not allowed to be back here. The only way that you even physically got back here is by abusing, like, the privileges of your father in order to get into an area where you shouldn't have been able to be without having permission first.
Man, I need to re-listen to this. I'm going to listen to this episode again tomorrow. It's so good.
Also, I mean, I love any time that we focus on how a lot of the things that people do to try and make restitution for their errors is more about making themselves feel better for the guilt that they feel instead of actually understanding ways that they can make positive differences for others. And you're not actually thinking about how other people feel or what kind of impact you're having on anyone other than yourself. Coming back to the global missions thing, even. So I'm glad that they focused on that. And I do find it funny that, like, I feel like it's so incredibly valid that Cooper decides he wants to quit the football team because he caused it was kind of on purpose, and he caused an injury, and it permanently ended someone's promising sports career. And he's like, this is terrible. This isn't just about guilt. I don't want this to happen to anyone else. This is a dangerous sport. I'm leaving the football team. And everyone's like, you're just consumed by guilt. You need to get over it and get back on the team. And I'm like, the number of people who die from football-related injuries or have, like, lifelong debilitating injuries from playing football is very real, and it is a hot button issue. And the fact that Cooper, like, I mean, obviously there is guilt in play, but he's recognizing this fact, and that even if you don't want to hurt someone, that doesn't mean that you can't ruin someone's life while playing this game. And then everyone's like, get over it. And then in the end, he's like, okay.
Okay.
Still, I'm not a huge fan of it. But I mean, like, repetitive cranial trauma is not an issue that I think the audience of this show specifically really needs to be educated about at this age. So I'm willing to let that one slide.
Except for when it's Jules.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of understanding, like, the main point of this episode is to understand that sometimes trying to apologize and get someone's forgiveness is not about making them feel better or giving them emotional resolution. It's just about lifting guilt off of your own chest. And if that's the case, then, hopefully you can get their forgiveness one day. But the more important thing is to focus on how you can be directing yourself to help others rather than, alleviate your own emotions about the situation. It's not about you. And I really like any episode that addresses that.
Showdown in Sampoko. Speaking of brutal episodes, I never talked to my brother again.
And then he died he died a violent death.
After he got taken for, like, human trafficking and stuff in the first place.
Yes. I'm still blown away by how lame Wilson is at the beginning, when he should have, by all rights, been a lot smoother. He was like this motorcycling dude. He's traveled all over the world at that point. Think about this episode where he was in Guinea and he was in prison and stuff like this.
Okay, but, like, to be fair, Wilson has always been lame.
I know, but it's like he's done
Think
a lot
about
of
that.
cool stuff at this point. I was
He's
thinking,
done some cool stuff, but that doesn't negate the fact that overall he's a very lame person. I'm not saying that
it
doesn't
makes
mean I
me
don't
think of
love
the
him
episode
still.
where he was in Guinea in the prison, and it's like, that was you the whole time. I'm like, how did he survive in the yard when he's like rolling up to the gas station on his
I think
Vespa,
it's like the
barely
same way Paddington survived in prison, or it's just like being kind,
he's speaking.
befriending people.
Well, clearly not. I've listened to the episode.
Except for like all the people that
Yeah,
died.
he shows up to the Dominican Republic speaking barely any Spanish, and he speaks like 3 words, and then what he does, he's like, "Hola, ¿cómo estás? Are you from a riding club of bicycles, a motorized bicycles?" And then the ranch lady, when she says that she's not going to sell the land for the amount that was slated, before she does her big reveal of like, "I'll sell it for half, gotcha," Wilson jumps in there to like get mad at her and be like, "Hey, I'll make you do it." I'm like, whoa, like, hey man, you don't know this community or this lady, and you're like stepping in front of the person here who's actually trying to get the land to be like up in her face about it. Like, he's
I think it's just some ways of seeing like Wilson is a different person now than he used to be.
it's just weirdly aggressive. When I hear that part, I'm like, whoa, he just really got all up in her business of like, hey, we're going to use that for good stuff. How dare you not donate this land you're not using for anything? And it's like,
Anytime a character is just like really lame in the way they talk, I think of Until Dawn and like the dialogue in
this is
Until
basically
Dawn.
the same as Until Dawn.
And then, yeah, I think of in the real time fan dub where at one point Josh calls Chris my absolute flavors of dude, which straight up sounds like something that would be actual dialogue in Until Dawn.
I thought you were saying something that Wilson
that is the
would
line
say.
where I listened to it and I was like, I know for a fact Ryan has played Until Dawn because that feels like a line taken
Yes,
out
absolutely.
of this. Shaped like a friend.
I do like how the
Wilson is shaped like a friend.
I do like how the episode did not force Alejandro to be forgiving his brother right away or changing his lifestyle right away or at all, and only having like just a little hint of change in his character after his death, and the fact that no resolution happened until years later, which all feels much more realistic than a cliche immediate change of heart. Like, oh man, I was kidnapped by the cartel as when I was like 7 years old and spent my entire
But I
life
got over
living in
it.
drugs and gang violence, perpetuated in a cycle of abuse. But you did give me a harmonica now, so like,
And it was really shiny. You kept good care of it. I remember when we reviewed these 2 episodes, because I think we reviewed them in the same video.
yes,
The main thing we kept on talking about was like how hard hitting both the episodes were in terms of how realistic they unexpectedly were. And also because of like, yeah, they kind of felt like gut punches at certain times because you don't expect media to really, especially like of this type, like Odyssey,
show,
to like
yes.
go that hard in like that way. But
yes, lots of violence, unexpected.
yeah, I mean, good things to teach children, not violence, but the fact that like sometimes certain people won't move on from something. Sometimes you can't fix things like easily, and
Yeah, you can't force someone else's heart to change.
And sometimes you don't get closure for something, which sucks, but is true.
Friend in need. I mentioned this earlier, listening to it the second time.
Love this episode.
Yeah, I said this earlier, I won't repeat that. Jay, when he starts tearing up while he's talking, it makes me so bleeding emoji. And when Buck, at the end of the episode, he drops Jay off at the convention, and Buck tells Jay to say hi to his dad for him, I was like, does Buck know Jay's dad? Maybe through Eugene, I guess.
I don't know.
It suddenly
I could
struck
see
me.
Jay's dad.
Buck was like,
Eugene's.
say hi to your dad for me. And I was like,
I was in Jay's dad and Buck's dad, Eugene.
Yes.
Jay's dad and Eugene getting along.
I'm glad you remembered his name.
Well, Eugene's.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I'm ashing you for forgetting Lucia's name.
Oh. Stop bullying me.
No.
Once again, please address the Jay and Zoe thing. We will not get into it again. We already talked about it a bunch earlier. We talked about it in every episode that has them.
Yeah.
Next episode, Knox on Sacrifice.
If they
Love
never
the
make
young wit content.
If they never make an episode for Wilson with his podcast called Knocks on Wood, then what's even the point? Give us an episode, and the theme is wood.
It's about
trees.
It's about Noah's Ark.
It's about trees.
It's
about
forestry. Noah's Ark. It has a reference and story to Lord of the Rings.
Woodworking.
And about Johnny Appleseed.
Uh-huh.
There, 3 things. I got the Bible story. I got the
literary reference.
The history kind of story. And I got the... I don't remember what the third one was already. I already forgot.
The Lord of the Rings?
I have the memory of a hummingbird. Lord of the Rings.
That's why I said literature.
Yeah, but I couldn't remember what it was anyway.
It's a book series. Yeah, it's a book series, and then they made movies out of them.
I wish I was wearing my ring right now. It's a book series.
Yeah.
I only know the
we got a little young wit cameo. So can't complain about that. We just talked about this like a couple minutes ago.
I wish every Knox On episode had a different segment telling a story from Wilson's childhood.
Yeah, he has to embarrass wit every single time.
That's canon. If it weren't for the fact
instead
that,
of an
like,
ad break,
then...
Wilson's podcast has a segment in the middle where you tell embarrassing childhood stories about wit.
But he does it when he says it's an ad break. Listeners know it's code for time to embarrass Wit, but Wit goes to the bathroom.
Exactly, because Wit knows that Wit is just going to hit the skip 30 seconds button.
Exactly. He starts every ad break and he's just like, "Have you heard of Casper Mattress?"
That's
and
why
then he's like, "Okay, guys, he's gone."
But he can only do it for 28-second segments because then in those little bit of 30 seconds, and he's like, "HelloFresh," and then Wit and Jack came over and then they slipped on a banana peel and fell all over the place and ripped their clothes, and then the Sunday splashed ice cream all over Wit's hair.
Yeah, it's like, and that's how Wit caused the stock market to fail in our hometown as children for the 5th time.
Yeah.
Then Wit comes back and he's just like, "Okay, and now to return to our program, let's talk about the New Testament." That's my Wilson impersonation.
Very good. Excellent. Gregory Jabara. They credited him as Greg Jabara, I think, on this one. So I wonder if he's trying to like change his name brand.
Getting hipper with time.
Yeah. So that is the year. Those are the episodes that it contained. Favorite, least favorite.
I definitely don't think I can rank them right now.
No, I mean, we don't usually rank all of them.
Okay, that's good. I don't know if I can pick one specific favorite. I think like results may vary. Fishing for Gold and Friend in Need are like my top. And then I don't know. I don't really like strongly dislike any of the episodes in this album.
I might put 18 Yard Line at the top for me.
18 Yard Line is super, super good.
18-Yard Line,
That's
but
another
Knocks
one of my
on Love
favorites.
and Aberrant Automaton are up there.
And what are your least favorites?
Maybe Way of the Comic Book.
Yeah.
Perhaps. Yeah, I think that's what I would put on the bottom.
That's
Overall,
fair.
the episodes in this,
I'll probably
like I
copy
said,
your
they're all
answer.
pretty close to each other. There's not a lot of like super outlying answers on either the high or low end of the scoring spectrum.
Yeah. That's it. I don't think we usually give a number rating to the year, do we?
I think we do. I'm gonna give this one
Like a 3.9.
I was gonna say like 3.9 or like 4.0.
Yeah. 3.8,
4.0.
3.9.
4.0.
Like good episodes, none of them incredible, like you just said. None of them horrible.
Yeah, but they're not just mediocre though. They all have like a little nugget of like really good content.
Yeah.
That a lot, I don't think there might not be any
I'd
previous
say
AIOC
at
seasons
worst,
that lack an episode like worse than like the lowest one in this season. Like most seasons have, I think every other season might have one I would rank lower than all of these. Like it's not.
I agree with
it's
that.
not
I
that
think
they're
like at
mediocre.
the worst, you could say one of these was just okay, but I don't think you'd be able to say anything
There's none of them that I
worse
dislike.
than that. Yeah.
Which is
I don't dislike
which
any
is
of them
a
either. That's
good.
why it's hard to find.
It's like the
like
most.
even Way of the Comic Book. I like that episode.
This
I like only said
album
good things
is the
about
most
it.
consistent. It has the lower standard deviation.
Yeah. Predictions or saving that?
Nope. Predictions.
Do you have a list of?
I do. I could just read them
All
out
of
and then
them?
we'll talk about them as we go.
Okay. I won't look at any pictures. I saw the picture for the new one.
Yeah,
that
I saw the
just
pictures.
came
Now
out
I
from
forget them again.
November
Okay,
when
these
I
are 2023
pulled it up.
episodes, of which only one has not yet come out.
Could you send me the list?
I said I'm going to read them. So
Okay.
you could just react as we go. These are episodes 958
Alright.
through 975. First one is reporting live from Mount Sinai.
Gonna get the news anchor guy back, played by Keith Ferguson, probably.
Yeah, it'll be,
Marluxia, my husband.
if we still have like OT Action News, which I highly doubt we have, but obviously it sounds like a kids radio thing. Either way, Mount Sinai, we're probably going to be looking at Ten Commandments, Golden Calf. That's kind of the main bread and butter for Mount Sinai occurrences. If I almost said like, Elijah on the mountain, that's not Mount Sinai, that's Mount Carmel.
If it makes you feel better, my brain went to Elijah's story, but my head supplied the word Moses, so I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be Moses on the mountain, and then the golden calf, and then they have a chocolate Eugene.
They have the electronic wit. He's returned.
Yes. Dose of
He's back.
virtual reality.
Is that the second one?
Yes.
What's it called?
Dose of virtual reality. So, Renee. Absolutely. Renee's up to her
Renee being
old...
scarred again, or scarring
She's
someone
up to her
else,
old
'cause
tricks, by which I mean the tricks that she
Horace,
is receiving from Wit.
Please.
Yeah.
Love some Horace.
The Jacobs Report, Robert Smalls. So,
Robin Jacobs?
I would assume Dale Jacobs.
Dale.
Because
Yeah.
Phil still writes like a third of the episodes. And he's still voiced...
It's been a bit since we've seen Dale. When was the last time?
But the last time we saw Phil was probably 2 episodes ago, because he still does bit voices constantly. So
No, I said Dale.
I know. Dale specifically, I don't remember. It's been a couple years, I think. Robert
He was
Smalls.
in Labyrinth, but we've seen him since
seen him
then.
since
I
then.
think we saw him in one of the multi-parters.
Yes.
Like one of the big album ones.
Yeah. Robert Smalls, I believe, is a name that's familiar to
Sounds
me.
like a doctor?
But I didn't...
Historical doctor. I'm going to Google this man.
I didn't Google it in case the spoiler came up.
Google
but
it.
I'm pretty sure that's a name I've heard. But, I mean, they're both names.
This man is a doctor, I'm pretty sure. Nope, I'm incorrect.
Is he a general or something, a military person?
Close. American politician, publisher, businessman, maritime pilot. Born into slavery, freed himself, crew, families.
Spoilers.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, so
we don't know.
I assume this is going to be like a new format of episode where Dale Jacobs like does a investigative report kind of format thing on like kids radio or something like that, but he's doing about a historical figure.
He got fired from the newspaper, and now he works for the radio show.
Survivor Boy. This is obviously
J Buddy.
No, it's about
Wood Scouts, or whatever they're called.
About,
that's DuckTales.
What's his face? Who's the small one? Who's Bridget's brother? Perkins. Wyatt. That's his name.
Wyatt.
Yeah, I think I saw the art for this one specifically.
It sounds like another Boy Scouts one.
I think it's about, independent of that, the fact that Wyatt is like survivalist. Like, don't worry, guys, I have a filtration kit and jerky and MREs in my backpack, so when we got snowed into the bus, we could like drink our own urine to survive.
I'm gonna say Wyatt J Boy Scouts is my guess.
Okay. He was not in that
because we've already gotten several Boy Scouts.
Yeah, those
kind of things.
Yeah, the Trail Boys or whatever.
Yeah,
Wyatt
with
so
Scooby-Doo
far is not
stuff.
a part of that group, but he may become one.
He could become one. It was Buddy and Jay, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Next up is The Fast and the Ridiculous.
No idea.
We're doing go-karts again. Someone's gonna explode.
It's just line for line the TV show.
Yeah. Well, no, I meant the AIOC episode where Horace accidentally gave like nitrous to the
My
kids.
prediction is this year we get more Horace, and I love that. I love that for him. I love Horace. How old is Horace again? Is he Renee's age or is he younger?
I don't know. I mean, he's at the college, so probably early 20s.
My son.
He's a TA, right? So yeah, he's probably like 20 or something like that. Maybe a little older. Mile 151.
Part 2 of Horace doing science and
that's how far
cars.
They drive. Quarter mile at a time, and after 604 of those quarter miles, they make it to mile 151.
Mm-hmm.
Precious Lord Parts 1 and 2. Probably a historical sad story or something.
Either that or a missionary story, because we haven't gotten one of those since. Well, I guess the
Friend in Need, or not that.
Friend in Need,
one.
not
Results may vary.
but we never actually like saw any of the missionary work.
Yeah.
In that episode, no, the Wilson one.
Yes, Sam Poco was one. You're correct. Alibis. Jason and Jillian are solving a crime. Probably not. It's probably about
Jay
lying
is causing problems, or Emily and Maury and Suzu, and could be them.
Could be them. Extended cut. Sounds kind of meta. I don't know. They're filming a movie in Odyssey.
I saw the album art for this one and the description. I know what this one's about. I won't comment.
Extended cut. It's a behind the scenes episode because we haven't had one in almost 500 episodes.
Can I just say, I saw a little description. It looks like it's basically just a newer version of A Day in the Life.
So I was right on my first call. The show must go on, parentheses, and on. close parentheses.
Part 2 of
Nope.
A Day in the Life?
Yeah,
Revised.
exactly. This is the encore. Extended cut, and then extended cut, extended parentheses.
Mm-hmm.
And final one, untitled Christmas episode. I don't know, it's not December yet, so based on the previous 2 episode titles, it could well actually be titled Untitled Christmas Episode, although I do doubt that.
I think it should be called that.
I would like it to be, but I doubt that's the case.
We should do... What do you want for a Christmas episode? Who do you want to focus on? We got a lot of characters last year, so let's come up with some new ones.
Yeah, they probably won't do anything with Jason and Jillian because it's the AIOC.
Oh, Jason, Jillian Christmas would be so cute. They get snowed in at Triple J's.
Yeah, they won't do that because it's the AIOC and they want...
And also, Jillian would be no match. The snow would be no match for her. She would, laser vision her way out. She can do anything.
Well, no, I think she would get trapped and she would tell Jason the story of the Christmas bells. Oh, wait, no, Jason was the one who told that story. Never mind.
No, wait, was it Jason?
Yeah, he's the one who... It was at the antique store. It was at the antique store. They came in to talk to Jason. He told the story.
Yeah, but for some reason I thought it wasn't Jason.
Well, same. That's why I was like, she's going to tell him the story. And I was like, oh, wait, he was the one who
No, better yet, she tells him the story and he's like,
remembers.
I'm the one who told this story. And she's like, you were.
She tells him the story as she remembers hearing it through the wall.
Oh, yes.
Her Mad Libs.
Telephone.
Her Mad Libs telephone version. Yeah.
It isn't until the end of the episode that he even realizes that it was the Christmas bell story.
Because it's so wrong.
Just so off the mark.
Yeah, obviously, in this case, she's staying as Ditzy Jillian throughout the entire episode for no explicit reason. So
there's
that it's funnier.
One person in the corner who might buy something who also got snowed in.
Yeah, Jules.
So
Jules is there working on homework. So
just quietly, like Christmas bells, you can't hear Jules in the episode, but she is there.
I'm gonna predict that the album that we're about to start reviewing, the one that is coming out, I'm gonna say the one after that one. No. 2 more. So this one coming out right now that we're about to start reviewing. And then the next one, it's the one after that. That's when Jules is going to find out about Jillian. That's my prediction of how long it will take.
I definitely don't think it's going to happen this album.
No.
So, yeah, I think it'll either be the next one after this, or you're right, and it's the one after that. I think it would also be very funny if,
like I said,
Jules never finds out for 10 years and then finds out later. I would love a, was it Last Adventure of Summer?
Uh-huh.
Is that what it's called?
That is an episode.
I love that episode. I would love, one kind of like that, but it's about Jules and Jillian.
That would be interesting.
Where Jules accidentally ends up on an adventure with Jillian.
Fascinating, yeah. My biggest hope overall, and I like how we're talking about this fully now, even though it has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I talked about it before in 27 Hours, but my biggest hope, my number one wish for the way that plays out is everyone finding out that Jules figured it out months and months ago and just never said anything to anyone.
Yes, that's also very good.
And that Connie has had to work so hard and bend over backwards so much to keep this secret from Jules, and Jules knew the entire time.
Jules is I thought we all knew about and by extension, Buck would know too.
Uh-huh. But
he would also think it wasn't a big deal, which is really funny because Eugene and Katrina don't know.
Uh-huh.
I think it'd be funny if Buck just talks about it casually around Eugene and Katrina, but they just get confused and don't understand what he's talking about.
I think Jillian and Eugene should spend more time together, personally.
I do too, because we've only gotten the one episode, pretty much, where she ruined his life because she was like, I need the job with Jason. Which is so funny. She's like, I'm gonna just wreck everyone's lives until Jason offers me a job.
Okay.
And I also think I would accept Jillian having totally spies makeup weapons, and Jules going to borrow some of her makeup and like take the cap off like a lipstick, and it's like a laser.
And she lasers a piece off of her skull and has to go and get
Oh
her
no,
children.
not again.
Dr. Calhoun is
also
going to have
think
to
it'd
move
be-
into the Kendall household at this point.
I know we got them in a past. Actually, that wasn't a Christmas episode. That was a Thanksgiving episode. The Smouses. I would love a very Smouse Christmas with also Wally
A Christmas.
being there. Chris Mouse. I can't think of a J.
A Christmas carol.
Christmas. A Chris Mouse
J-roll.
story.
Yeah.
Um,
It's Christmas J.
I love when people build puns off of puns to the point where it's
That's
just
unrecognizable, yeah.
incomprehensible what the original thing what they were supposed to say was.
Yeah.
Let's wrap up.
Yes. What are we talking about next time, Victoria?
We're talking about the beginning of the new album.
Nope, because we
finally.
haven't done predictions for it yet.
We're not talking about the beginning of the new album. You guys don't get to know anything about that. We're talking about, I guess, the beginning of OAC Season 10.
Yep.
Reporting live from Mount Sinai, and Douse of Virtual Reality. That one has a scary cover. Oh, I see the characters on the cover of that one. I'm excited.
So that's what we're talking about next time, and predictions for the new album, so that the episode after that we can finally start getting to it, so that we can then talk about the end of that album, which is what everyone wants to get to, obviously.
Yes.
Man, it has been a long time since we released an episode. I'm glad we're finally done with this one. We can put it out.
Okay.
So, until next time, thank you for joining us on our side of the YouTube. I've been Devin Francis, also known as Dr. Blackard.
And I wish I wasn't wearing shorts. This chair's really uncomfortable in them.
And you've been watching the Adventures in Odyssey Oddcast.
Oddcast. Nailed it.